might be an extra few minutes late. So this was MPs talking after question period yesterday. And as you guys know, Trudeau had to meet with all the premiers. And the big topic of conversation was Trump tariffs and fixing the border, things like that. This is what Trudeau had to say after question period yesterday.
Looking forward to talking about Team Canada with the premiers tonight. There's lots of work to do altogether, but we can see that one of the great strengths of Canada is different perspectives focused on standing up for Canadians. That's what this is all about. C'est une opportunité importante de parler avec les premiers ministres sur notre approche Équipe Canada. Le fait que les premiers ministres ont différentes perspectives et différentes approches renforce les valeurs communes que nous avons en tant que Canadiens et nous aide à être là pour défendre les intérêts des Canadiens.
Avez-vous un plan chiffré sur la présenter?
Est-ce que c'est le moment d'intervenir?
Canadians are fed up with this dispute.
With you.
They do not believe that the parties have taken these negotiations seriously. I hear that from small business owners, from rural and remote communities, indeed, Indigenous stakeholders. So it's time for these parties to reflect the great responsibility that they have, get on with these negotiations, get a deal, and return the Postal Service to Canadians.
À partir du moment de quand est-ce que le gouvernement va intervenir?
Je peux-tu faire le premier?
Oui, mais c'est la même question. En fait, est-ce que c'est le moment d'intervenir? En fait, c'est ça la question.
Les Canadiens auront aux gens de... Donc,
d'administration?
Je suis à l'heure actuelle.
Mais est-ce que c'est le moment?
Envers les Canadiens.
Est-ce que sinon,
Every day is a new day.
Oui.
Every day is a new day. And for today, I'm telling these parties to take very seriously the work that they have before them and to get a deal done.
Sinon, qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Il n'y a pas de sinon, il n'y a pas de question hypothétique ici. Aujourd'hui, on a un Code canadien du travail qui prévoit un système de négociation collective et je demande aux deux parties de remplir les grandes responsabilités qu'elles ont.
Mais la question, c'est à partir de quand, juste à partir de quand, est-ce que vous vous dites, moi, il faut que j'intervienne dans votre tête, là, parce que c'est sûr qu'à un moment donné, il y a un bloc, il y a...
Okay, and then earlier today, this happened today, because they had the premiers meet together yesterday. Doug Ford held a press conference and was talking about how it went, was asked by reporters about, is there anything that's on your mind now? And this is what he had to say.
This isn't enough. Municipalities, local police forces, communities, the courts, they need new tools. So this afternoon, our government will introduce legislation that will protect communities, clear out encampments, make our parks and public spaces safe again, and get people the help they need. These new measures include amendments to the Trespass to Property Act to enhance penalties for people who deliberately and repeatedly break the law. The legislation will also make it crystal clear that it is illegal to use illicit drugs in a public space, including encampments. Police will have the new tools to direct individuals to stop the use of illegal drugs or to leave the public space, with fines of up to $10,000 and up to 6 months in prison for people who repeatedly use illegal drugs in parks and public spaces. As part of the measures we're announcing today, we're requiring more accountability as to how provincial investments are being spent to make sure it is being used as effectively as possible to end encampments and help people in need find a safe and appropriate place to live.
Okay, so in other words, he's saying that he wants to clear out the encampments. That's what I got from that. As he's sick of Trudeau's 10 cities and Trudeau not doing anything about it. So he's like, we're just going to clear them out. I don't know. That's a good question. Someone just said in chat, where are the homeless to go? I don't know. I don't know where you're going to put them. There are a lot of homeless shelters and stuff, but I actually have no idea where you would put them. Let's see what else we got while we're waiting, because committee is a little bit late today. It's usually like that on Thursdays. Sometimes they're 5, even 10 minutes late. Looks like they're already running 9 minutes late. Let's Let's hear what some other
Confirmer
ministers
clairement
had to
le
say.
leadership du gouvernement canadien. C'est le gouvernement canadien qui a la compétence et la responsabilité en matière de frontières.
Yes,
La deuxième
rehab. I
chose
agree.
sur laquelle
Put
on
them in
s'attend
rehab,
aussi,
except
c'est
I think they
la
have to pay for that. I don't think
collaboration
it's
et l'appui
subsidized.
des provinces, dont l'appui du gouvernement canadien. Le droit de faire les...
Since it's unsafe for its citizens to come to Canada. I wonder if you have some thoughts about this warning from Russia.
I highly doubt that's accurate.
Est-ce que vous allez faire partie de cette rencontre avec les premiers ministres?
Are you worried that having announced the $250?
Do you think Canada risks being seen as caving into Trump?
I don't think there's any caving in. We have a partnership, we have an allyship, and we'll continue to be good friends and make sure that we have both security on both sides.
Will there be dollars?
India is weaponizing visas. India is weaponizing visas. I don't know if you've heard it from any of your constituents, but people who would like to travel to India are being told to sign forms before they get visas. They're being essentially threatened.
Every country has the right to determine who enters their country. Canada has its right to determine who enters their country, our country, and they have their right. We'll continue to have a relationship with India, and we'll continue to negotiate on any problematic areas.
Mr. Oliphant, on the
Foreign
plan.
Affairs Committee about to tell this government to immediately recognize a Palestinian state. What's in the report?
We're in camera, thanks. And the report is still the report is still confidential.
Qu'est-ce que vous attendez de la rencontre entre le premier ministre ce soir et les premiers ministres des provinces sur la frontière? Qu'est-ce qui doit se passer ce soir? C'est le moment de présenter le plan frontière?
Okay, let's see what the House is up to while we wait, because there's a lot of French going on and they don't have translation.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Oh, they're
Mr.
voting
Burson.
still.
Mr.
They're
Burson.
voting
Mr. Van
on
Couverden.
Mr. Van Couverden.
veteran
Mr.
stuff.
Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Assassi.
Mr. Sassy.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Sidhu Brampton East.
Mr. Cedar Brampton East.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Sarai.
Man,
Mr.
committee's
Sarai.
late today.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Kellaway.
Ms.
Maybe that's why,
Vandenvelde.
because the
Ms.
vote.
Vandenvelde.
That's
Madame
why.
Briere.
That would make
Madame
sense.
Briere.
So after
Mr.
this
McLeod.
vote, it should
Mr.
be
McLeod.
Mr.
committee
Morrissey.
time.
Mr. Morrissey.
Ms. Sidhu Brampton South.
Ms. Cedar Brampton South.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Ms. Hefner.
Ms. Hefner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Ms. Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Yep, yep.
Madame Mendez.
Madame Mendez.
Ms. Bradford.
Miss Bradford.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Ms. Thompson.
Miss Thompson.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Michaud.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Trudel.
Monsieur Trudel.
Madame Berubé.
Madame Bérubé.
Monsieur Désilet.
Monsieur Désilet.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. Matheson.
Mr. Johns.
Mr. Johns.
Ms. McPherson.
Miss McPherson.
Ms. Gazan.
Ms. Gazan.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGregor.
Madame Hughes.
Madame Hughes.
Ms. Barron.
Ms. Barron.
Mr. Desjardins.
Mr. Desjardins.
Ms. May, Saanich Gulf Islands.
Ms. May, Saanich Gulf Islands.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period. Excusez-moi. On a besoin des vacances.
Excuse me, I need a vacation.
Oh, please rise. La Chambre attendra maintenant la fin.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
Okay. Man, committee is still not starting. Let's see what else we can watch in the meantime. They are exceptionally late today. Let's see what Premier Smith had to say earlier today.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's great to be here with the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis, Chief Bob Andrews from the Alberta Sheriffs, and Angela Kemp from the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team, or ALERT, to discuss security at the Canada-U.S. border. Today, Alberta's government is taking immediate action to crack down on illegal activities at our shared Alberta-U.S. border, namely illegal migrants and the trafficking of drugs and guns. This suite of measures will curb illegal border activities and strengthen our nation's border security. We're investing $29 million to create a new unit, the Interdiction Patrol Team, or IPT, under the command of the Alberta Sheriffs. This unit will be supported by over 50 specially trained sheriffs. 4 drug patrol dogs, critical to ensure reasonable suspicion to search vehicles. 10 cold weather surveillance drones that can operate in high winds with dedicated pilots. And 4 narcotics analyzers to test for illicit drugs. The IPT will be made up of 7 teams of sheriffs. We will also create a 2-kilometer deep border zone, which is a red zone deemed critical infrastructure to enable the sheriffs to arrest individuals found attempting to cross the border illegally or attempting to traffic illegal drugs or weapons without needing a warrant. The criminals behind these activities destroy lives on both sides of the border, and these measures are our way of stopping it. It doesn't mean that Alberta intends or wants to act alone when it comes to securing the border. We'll obviously keep working closely with our federal counterparts at the Canada Border Services Agency, as well as the RCMP. We will start filling the ranks of the border teams as soon as possible. Our goal is to have the Interdiction Patrol Unit up and running by early next year. Together with federal law enforcement, we'll ensure that our section of the American border is well protected. We'll deny safe haven to criminals looking to operate in both countries. And if we succeed and maintain proper border security, I expect we will have a very strong relationship with the United States, as we always have. Now I'd like to invite Minister Mike Ellis forward to share more details about the new unit.
Okay, let's skip past that.
Thank you very much, Premier.
Let's listen to her answer questions from reporters.
Good morning, Premier. Jen Hodson for the Western Standard. What do you make of Doug Ford's vow to cut off energy to the U.S. in the wake of the 25% tariff threats?
Well, let me be clear from the Alberta perspective. Under no circumstances will Alberta agree to cut off oil and gas exports. We don't support tariffs. I don't support tariffs on Canadian goods, and I don't support tariffs on U.S. goods, because all it does is make life more expensive for everyday Canadians and everyday Americans. So instead, we're taking a diplomatic approach, and we're meeting with our allies in the U.S. We're making the case for Alberta oil and gas to be part of the solution to energy affordability, to energy security, and to, generally speaking, North American defense security as well. And of course, we'll work with our counterparts in Montana in a shared border arrangement so that we can improve public safety, crack down on illegal migrants and illegal drug trafficking. And that's part of the reason why we're announcing this today. We know that there are issues that have been identified that are irritants to the current administration. We've identified those as a problem in Alberta as well. We're accelerating our plan, but that is our approach, is one of diplomacy, not threats.
And Rachel Notley just announced her resignation as MLA from Edmonton Strathcona. Would you be willing to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, she was Premier for 4 years, and she was one of our longest-serving members of the Legislative Assembly. I think when you look at the support that she got in her community during elections, people felt very well represented by her. So I'll look forward to seeing what her next steps are.
Thank you.
Heather Yorks West, Global National. Thanks for taking my question. So if retaliatory oil and gas tariffs are off the table, what about other sectors? Is there anything further that your government would consider?
Well, just think about what retaliatory tariffs look like and use the examples that the Prime Minister gave. Ketchup and playing cards and bourbon and cherries. So what that would mean is that cherries for Canadian consumers are 25% more expensive. Playing cards for Canadian consumers are 25% more expensive. Bourbon for Canadian consumers are 25% more expensive. So that's what is being contemplated here, is making life more expensive for Canadians. I don't think that that's the right approach. When I was down in the U.S. at the Western Governors Conference, what I said is that that there is a substantial amount of oil and gas that goes across the border. In fact, It's somewhere in the order of $133 billion worth of trade on oil, and somewhere near $22 billion worth of trade on natural gas, and also lubricants and other products that come from petroleum. If all of those have a 25% tariff, it'll make life more expensive for American consumers. Some of the analysis we've seen is that a 25% tariff would add $1 a gallon to every gallon of gasoline that Americans purchase. And I don't think that when I mentioned that to all of the governors that I spoke with, their eyes went wide. They know what that would mean. And so I think that is the better road, is for us to talk about why it is we have such a robust and strong mutual relationship on trade that works very well for both countries. And that's the approach we're taking.
And assuming this border plan came up during your meeting with the premiers yesterday, what was their reaction, and are any other provinces considering similar measures? Would you encourage that?
The Prime Minister has taken note that other provinces have been talking about doing something similar to this. Quebec is talking about deploying some of their provincial police force, same with Ontario. Wabkanu in Manitoba has talked about deploying some of his conservation officers, who I think are very well trained as well. And so they have a plan that they shared with us, and they'll be rolling it out, I'm sure, in due course. I was pleased to see that they wanted to get the provincial buy-in on the approach that they're taking, and I was glad to see that it was very much consistent with what we're doing. As Mike mentioned, he's already reached out to his counterparts in border security as well as with the RCMP. So we're well on our way, and I'll look forward to seeing what the federal government rolls out in other provinces.
You know, I usually don't pause and talk over people, but I do have a point on this, because if you look at some of the areas of Quebec where the border is, and there's no border there, it's just like a forest, and you can just walk, you know, from one forest part of the Quebec border to the USA part. And there's drones sometimes that fly overhead. I've always wondered why they don't just camera a crap load of that. Like, where areas where it's known that people cross, why don't they just do a crap ton of cameras that are overhead and underhead, and they have sensors on them? Almost like, you know, when you have a light sensor that walks, if you walk in a room and the light turns on, you can easily do that with cameras, and it'll notify someone watching the camera that there's movement. And you can easily program these cameras so that way if birds or animals walk past, that it doesn't sense them. I just don't understand why we don't just camera the crap, or just use more drones. Just use a bunch more drones. That's how it is in BC. I didn't know that. Trail cams. I didn't know that. I've always wondered why we just don't camera the crap out of it.
Hello, Laurence Tachereau with Radio Canada. My first question would be for Inspector Kim. Can you precise detail about the numbers? You said that the fentanyl that was seized, is it coming from out of Canada, coming from the U.S. to Canada? Can you detail a bit more about those amounts?
Yeah, thank you. The majority of fentanyl that we're seeing is being manufactured in Western Canada, and the precursors we are seeing being imported from transnational locations.
Okay, so the amount you mentioned were all coming from Canada to the States?
No, the amount that was seized were from locations within Alberta.
Okay, and my second question would be for Premier Smith. The plan that you detailed today, is that something that was mentioned yesterday at the Premier's meeting to Justin Trudeau and all the other premiers?
The Prime Minister and the premiers were well aware that we were announcing a border plan. It was actually the Prime Minister who mentioned that our initiatives as well as the others. I know that Minister Ellis is in regular touch with his federal counterpart, and we've been in touch with the RCMP and Border Services. So we'll be looking forward to seeing if there are other ways that we can integrate. What we've said from the beginning is that we're prepared to work with our federal counterparts on any initiatives that they have, and they've got some things that are in the works. I think that you'll see more from them on the December 16th budget. They have a process that they have to go through in order to get the allocation of the dollars. We had a process we needed to go through to get the allocation of the dollars, and so I would expect that you'll see a little bit more detail about the federal plan on December 16th. But having gone through our process, this is what we're announcing today.
So
okay, so let's hear what the House has to say now. Because the House is back on stopping. They're not voting anymore, so I'm assuming committee should start any minute because they just had some votes to do. But apparently Gould's talking.
Precinct and to the pages in the House. We are served by an outstanding group of people.
Agréable à ce qu'il fait toujours.
Who take so much pleasure in what they do every day.
Member staff on the Hill and in our constituency offices for their dedication and tireless efforts. And on behalf of the Liberal members of Parliament, I would like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, a very Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and all of the best for the new year. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're just so ready to stop working on the 12th of December.
Je désire informer la Chambre.
I wish to inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will now be reset.
Member for Brantford Brock has. Sorry, I have the honourable member for. So what is it?
She doesn't know the writing.
Are these all points of orders?
Brock was first, man. Brock's
the
first.
member for Nanaimo Ladysmith has a point of order.
Why isn't Brock getting to go first?
To be able to wish everybody a very happy holidays, but is that something that I'm still able to do on behalf of the NDP? Right now.
But I don't think that's a point of order.
So so we were on the questions of the Thursday question. So the honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith is rising on a point of order for.
Madam Speaker, I was rising on behalf of the NDP to wish everybody a very happy holidays. That's why I was rising.
Honourable member to do that. The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I'm happy to rise as on behalf of people, of course, in my riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith, and behalf of the NDP, to say a big thank you to everybody here on the Hill. As a newly elected member of Parliament in 2021, it just astonishes me the incredible amount of work that's put into allowing us to be here every day, and all the people that make it happen, all of the pages, all the security, all the people that are making sure that we're fed and that we have what we need to be able to do our jobs in the Hill representing constituents. Of course, I want to also thank on behalf of the NDP all the staff here on the Hill as well as at home in our constituencies. With that, I won't take long. I see that the member's quite eager to speak, but I wanted to wish everybody a very happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. I hope everybody enjoys time with loved ones over the holidays. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the space.
You're here.
Thank you very much. The honourable for Brantford Brant has a question of privilege, if I remember correctly.
That's correct, Madam Speaker. Thank you. I'm rising further to the notice which I provided to the Chair under Standing Order 48 concerning the third and final report of the Special Joint Committee on the Declaration of Emergency, which was tabled in the House of Commons earlier today. In brief, on May 31st, 2022, the committee adopted an order for the production of several unredacted documents related to the government's declaration of a public order emergency in February of 2022, as well as the regulations and orders which were imposed in relation to it. The committee was particularly concerned with receiving and specifically ordered the production of a copy of the government's legal opinion for invoking the Emergencies Act. As outlined in the report, the then Deputy Minister of Justice and Deputy Attorney General of Canada wrote to the committee refusing to produce the legal opinion. While the material facts are outlined in the third report's Chapter 10, aptly titled Access to Information and Documents, I will recap the essential points for the benefit of those who aren't familiar with this particular saga, followed by citing pertinent authorities. In establishing the Special Joint Committee, the House conferred upon it, among other authorities, the power to send for persons, papers, and records. I would refer the Chair to subparagraph sub M, sub Roman numeral 2 of the motion adopted on March the 2nd, 2022, found at pages 471 to 473 and 480 to 484 of that day's journals. The Senate conferred the identical authority on the committee in subparagraph L, sub-Roman numeral 2 of the motion, which it adopted on March the 3rd, 2022, as recorded in a message which this House received and published at pages 487 to 490 of the journals for that day. This being the first ever invocation of the Emergencies Act, the mandate to be pursued by the Parliamentary Review Committee required by law to be appointed was something to be settled. As mentioned in the 8th paragraph of Chapter 2 of the 3rd report, the committee adopted a motion which, amongst other things, articulated the scope of the study it would initially pursue. The mandate included, quote, the options that the Government of Canada utilized during the invocation.
Okay, I hate to stop Mr. Brock because Larry Brock is fantastic, but our committee's on.
The committee that all remote participants, with the exception of Dr. Hanley, have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. We will have Dr. Hanley's issues resolved before we call on him to speak. Subject, okay, we're going to skip over the budget. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 Sub 2, the committee is commencing its study of the subject matter of the Supplementary Estimates B 2024-2025. I'd like to welcome our panel of witnesses joining us today. We have the Honourable Mark Holland, Minister of Health,
it's not
and
very
he has
but...
with him a team of officials accompanying him. From the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Diane Allen, Associate Vice President, Policy and Programs. From the Canadian Institute of Health Research, Dr. Tammy Clifford, Acting President. From the Department of Health, Eric Costin, Associate Deputy Minister. From the Public Health Agency of Canada, Heather Jeffrey, President. Dr. Kerry Robinson, Acting Vice President, Infectious Disease and Vaccination Programs Branch. And Lindsay Hollett, Assistant Deputy Minister, Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch. Thank you all for being here, albeit somewhat delayed.
Somewhat 30 minutes late.
You're very familiar with the with how things work here, and so I'm just going to hand it over to you, Minister. Welcome to the committee. You have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, I was hoping we had made a request to come here before the supplementary estimates, but nonetheless, a very important conversation to have. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, to be able to be here today. You referenced a number of officials. I want to take a moment to really thank them for their extraordinary work on behalf of the country. It is my very deep and great privilege to get an opportunity to get to work with them and as they work to serve Canadians. I'm going to talk at kind of a high level, if I could. I think we're in a moment of incredible consequence for healthcare in Canada. And it is wonderful. I've been having an opportunity over the last couple of months, as I do really all the time, to go and talk with stakeholders, but particularly the optimism within the health sector about the transformation that's possible. I just came back from Alberta on Friday, and I want to say a conversation with Adriana LaGrange around the possibility of working together and finding solutions, being able to talk about common language. There's a lot of differences we have, but one of the things that when you look at the transformation that must occur in our health system, there's a lot of areas of commonality that I think are really worth focusing on. 70% of chronic disease and illness can be prevented. Most of what fills our hospital rooms and hospital beds don't need to be there. And having effective response on prevention not only makes sense as a matter of health outcomes, it fundamentally makes sense economically. It's something that can unite us whether or not we are on the thinking about social justice and health outcomes, or we're thinking about productivity. And I have to say, around the federal provincial table, the positivity, the effort to set aside partisanship and find common ground has been deeply heartening. I had a conversation with Jeremy Cockrell, who's the new health minister in Saskatchewan, around that was very positive. Michelle Thompson, very positive. So I look forward to talking to the committee in that spirit and to take your questions in that spirit. Because we've been able to do some really important things. Let me start with dental. The most recent update, 93% of providers are participating. Now, you might recall that some folks said that we weren't going to have anybody sign up. 93% is pretty fantastic. Manitoba is leading the pack now with nearly 100%. In fact, we're having to redefine 100% because people are come forward we didn't even know were providers. In terms of the number of people who've received care, 1.25 million. And that's just over 7 months. In a year, 3 million registered. So I'm very excited for these next cohorts. And I mentioned dental to start because it's such an important area of both primary care and of health prevention, and also an example of where Parliament worked together in a spirit of collaboration. I see Peter Julian there and want to recognize Don Davies and the work that was done. It's difficult to find common ground and to ask constructive questions and how we can help Canadians, but I think that's what they expect us to do in a minority parliament. So now we're moving forward on the pharmacare agreements, which is also the product of cooperation in this chamber. That agreement is going to see diabetes medication and devices as well as contraceptives. It was wonderful to stand at a podium on drugs for rare diseases with Adriana LaGrange, making a commitment that Alberta is ready to move towards signing it. So I very much believe that all these agreements can be signed over the coming time. But one of the areas I'm really hoping today we can focus on, Mr. Chair, is Bill C-72. I'm not aware of anybody who's against the connected care legislation. This is legislation that will absolutely save lives. If you talk to Terry Price about her experience of her brother Greg and the problem with fax machines and data not being transferred, of a system that is not doesn't have interoperability, it places lives at risk. It blocks pathways to care, and it's one of the greatest frustrations for physicians. So I would ask, I understand there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of concerns, but here's an example of, I think, where we can come together. There's lots of things we can disagree on, but this is one where I'm aware of no province, no territory who's opposed. I'm aware of no political party that's opposed. So I would ask parliamentarians' assistance to pass this. It will save lives. It will improve our health system, and I'm aware of nobody who's opposed to it. So hopefully we can spend some time on that. I would also just say in closing, Mr. Chair, I appreciate these conversations. I hope that I'm afforded, 20 seconds of context. I love playing Jeopardy, but this is an important conversation that we need to have around the future of healthcare in this country, and certainly is deserving of more than staccato 2-second questions. And I look forward to that opportunity to illuminate and have a conversation on the ways that we can work together to the betterment of our health system.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm sorry to, but I'm going to be honest with you about your expectations. The rule that we've followed really since I took the chair on this committee is that the witness gets as much time to answer the question as the person posing it takes to pose it. But that there is an entitlement to cut you off if you go longer than the length of the question. They don't have to exercise that. They're free to let you continue, but it is up to them once you exceed the length of their question in your answer. I think what you will find is if there is one party, perhaps the official opposition, that tends to cut you off, you may find that there's another party that will give you a chance to expand upon your answer in a subsequent time slot. But the rule that I will be applying is the one that I just explained to you. You will have as much time to answer.
It's more a spirit than I appreciate your adherence to the rules and respect that, Mr. Chair, of course.
All right. So we're going to start now with rounds of questions in the manner to which we have become accustomed with Dr. Ellis for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. And to you, Minister, you talked about illness prevention. Can you tell Canadians how many Canadians, in percentage-wise, are struggling to access fresh fruit, fresh and affordable food in Canada? You like the Jeopardy question, so here's number one.
Yeah, well, I suspect that you have an answer. I never quite understand why you asked me a question that you seem to have an answer to. I mean, food insecurity is very serious. I hope that we could take a second to talk about the answers to food insecurity. It is a devastating impact in First Nations communities, rural, remote communities. It is a very difficult thing to quantify because you have food insecurity that takes many forms, whether or not it's access to fresh fruits and vegetables or whether or not it's access to food at all. We have food deserts. So it's
Again,
difficult to
Minister,
enumerate.
thanks very much. It's clearly that you don't have the clue of what the answer is. It's 32%, which is almost a third of Canadians. And you know, again, maybe the second Jeopardy question that you seem to love, how many Canadians are visiting food banks on a regular basis?
Well, far too many. I mean, I think the question I would pose to you is...
No, you're not asking me questions.
Sure, I can. I mean, that's absolutely my prerogative. You don't have the opportunity in a democracy to tell me what I can and can't do, Mr. Ellis. You cannot like it. But I'm saying that I just spent 5 minutes talking about solutions. So do you want to talk about solutions to the issue that you just raised, or do you want to just play this game where you're now going to say some statistic? Because I'm not interested in that, to be honest.
As a matter of fact, Minister, I know that you don't know the answers because we've well established that. Or you're too embarrassed to say that 2 million Canadians access food banks on a regular basis because of your government's reckless spending. Given that statistics, when you look at it, what about your temporary tax trickery? You know, when you begin to look at this, why don't you enlighten Canadians as to the actual GST amount on things like fresh fruits and vegetables and unprepared meats? What would that be?
Well, first of all, access to food banks and policies surrounding it deal with poverty. This is the government that for the first time set targets on poverty and has met them every single year. Well, we've seen too many people increasing in poverty. We see much lower levels than we saw in 2015 when we had a government, and the Conservative government, that never prioritized poverty or people who were living in food insecurity. So I would ask you what policies you have, Mr. Ellis, that would address these issues. I can enumerate the policies that we have to deal with both food insecurity and with food banks that are global issues, but as far as I'm aware, you have no policies on these ideas.
Dr. Ellis, please.
It's interesting because I would suggest that my job, as being in the opposition, would be to hold you to account, not to give you policies. So please tell Canadians the GST amount, it's a simple answer, on fresh meats that need to be cooked and fruits and vegetables.
So I disagree. I was in opposition. I absolutely, when I was a public safety critic, advocated for changes in policies. You have advocated none. If you're going to raise poverty and say that you care about food banks or insecurity or any such matter, having absolutely no policy that addresses those issues is irresponsible. And simply just criticizing, anybody can do that. I have a 10-year-old can do that with Google. Thank you very much,
Minister. You know, it's very clear that you do not understand that on uncooked meats and fresh fruits and vegetables, there is no GST, which directly relates to your temporary tax trick on behalf of Canadians, sadly. Can you then go on and perhaps describe the actual foods which GST will be eliminated off of with your temporary tax trick?
Well, I'm here to talk about the supplementary estimates. And so you want to talk about, again, having no policies. I can ask you, why did you vote against the Canadian Dental Care Plan?
You're not here to ask questions.
34,000 people in your home province have access care, a program that you said didn't exist. You said nobody would sign up for. More than 90% of people have now signed up. Why do you oppose dental care for people? Why do you, as a physician, not understand the importance of primary care that dental care represents?
You know, it's interesting, Minister, because when you look at your temporary tax trick, it actually goes directly to your program with respect to dental care, because, of course, on behalf of Canadians, you voted to remove the GST on candies, candy floss, chewing gum, chocolate, popcorn, coated or treated with candy, chips, crisps, puffs, curls, sticks of popcorn, et cetera, et cetera. And could you tell me that the benefit on the dental health of Canadians that your tax trick would provide?
You might recall that this same measure was suggested by Aaron O'Toole as a temporary measure to give people relief and to give them a tax break, or something normally the Conservative support, but you don't in this instance. So I would ask again, what are your policies to deal with tooth decay? What are your policies to, actually it's to cancel dental care. You would take dental care away from people. It takes some nerve to talk about sugar on one hand and talk about axing dental care on the other. So you want to talk about oral health? What is your policy on dental care, sir?
It's very interesting, Minister, that you refuse to answer any of the questions, because that's why we invited you here, is to attempt to get some answers, which
obviously you actually refuse to do. What about when we look at, Minister, the wait times in this country? Maybe this is easier for you. Can you talk about the recent report released by the Fraser Institute and talking about the longest wait times for care in the history of this country, which has happened, sadly, but not surprisingly, under your watch?
Well, actually, it's largely, you also know, of course, it's shared responsibility with the provinces, but the CIHI report actually showed, which is an independent report, progress in all of those metrics. But let me come back to it. Talk about sugar. You're against giving people diabetes medication. So, you know, you're going to talk about what we're doing on sugar, and you're against diabetes medication. You're going to criticize us on sugar in somebody's mouth, but you're against dental care. Sir, are you a physician? And if you are a physician, what would you do about people's oral health other than cut their dental care?
Sugar Minister, you're laughable. Your answers are actually quite hilarious on behalf of Canadians. I think it's absolutely shameful that you do not understand how things work. So you want to give them diabetes medications because you want to give them more sugar?
Point of order.
Shameful.
Point of order, Mr.
That's your time, Dr. Ellis. A point of order from Ms. Sidhu.
Let's be respectful to each other. That's what I just want to request. Thank you.
That's not a point of order.
Earned.
That's not a point of order.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right, that's it for Dr. Ellis. Next, over to Dr. Hanley, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to check that I'm being heard okay. Is my sound okay?
Yes, hold on a minute.
Okay.
No, the sound is not good. Can you move your microphone a little bit?
Okay. Can I check? How is this?
You can keep talking.
Better? Okay. I'll just keep talking, and if you can stop me if I'm not being heard. I just appreciate your presence, Minister Holland. And right off the top, I just want to say that I have agreed to share my time with Mr. Morris. Who is standing by.
Dr. Hanley, we don't have the go-ahead on your sound yet, so what you're undergoing right now, even though you don't realize it, is a sound check.
Oh, I see. Okay, then should I be?
Oh man.
Yeah, you can talk about the weather, please.
This guy needs to retire.
Okay. Well, the weather is mild, and there's a little bit of rain perhaps in the clouds, and I'm hoping that this is going to work for sound sound quality purposes. Do I have to go ahead?
I think there's an echo. Hold on.
Okay.
So what, they're checking his audio now?
Am I to keep talking? I'm not quite
Holy
sure.
crap, how long is he going to waste for this committee,
to do.
man?
I'm sorry,
We're already half an hour late.
Yes,
now we need
please,
another 20 minutes
keep
for him?
Okay, I will keep talking. I just want to ensure that I have a chance to ask my questions today of the minister, and so hoping that you're hearing me adequately. And I have my headset connect.
Our IT guy is going to call you because the connection is poor too.
Okay. I'll defer for now. I wonder if Mr. Morris.
Hanley, we're going to go to the next Liberal. We'll come back to you with the next Liberal slot. Hopefully, the problems will be resolved.
Okay.
We're trying to respect everyone's time here. Ms. Sidhu, please, for 6 minutes.
What a waste of time that was.
Thank you, Minister, and all the officials to be with us today. My question is to Minister. You talked about in the testimony and opening remarks about Pharmacare Act provided universal coverage for a range of contraception and diabetes medication and plus devices. Could you tell us more about the importance of this measure and why it's not included in this?
Well, thank you so much. So the previous budget 2024, had provided dollars for us to launch the first deals. Obviously, we're well into the year, so when these deals are signed, they'll be prorated. But, I mean, you look at the fact, and I want to thank you for your advocacy in the area of diabetes. It's been so important. This country spends about $30 billion a year managing diabetes. It is, and that's just in direct health costs. It doesn't attribute to lost productivity and the cost of business in this country. And so the biggest challenge within that is folks not being able to access their medicine. And I can tell you it's devastating to talk to doctors who have patients in front of them who can't follow through on their treatment regime because they don't have money for their medicine. And so it is fundamentally essential that everybody be connected to the medicine that they need. And this is a really important step forward. And I think a great example of what Parliament can accomplish when we focus on shared objectives. So we're ready to sign those deals very soon. There's obviously a lot that goes into them. As you would have seen from the Memorandum of Understanding in British Columbia, there's an opportunity to go further than what Parliament envisioned. In British Columbia, we had hormone replacement therapy for women, the drugs involved in that, added to the list, which is deeply exciting. I hope to have other exciting things to be able to talk about as we sign these agreements in the coming days.
With regards to CDCP, you also said 93% providers are signed. And can you talk about that, like how this CDCP is huge success? When I go back to my writing, I always have a positive feedback. And then when you said that they find common ground, and this is something, this is our success too. I just want to let you know, like there's lots of MPs, even though CPC, you talked about that, their residents also getting benefit. So can you elaborate on that, like how people are feeling that?
Well, I think it's been incredible to see the demand that's there exceeded, I think even what I understood to be out there, watching out in the world. Getting an opportunity to talk to providers. I was just talking to the head of the Canadian Denturists Association who said he had a patient 64 years, same pair of dentures, if you can believe it. That was his record. For that lady, every bite was pain, down to plastic plates in her mouth. And now she has a pair of teeth, thanks to this program. I don't see how we could possibly have any partisan differences around that. That's something that's fundamental. You can imagine what that did, not only to her sense of dignity, but to her health. Dr. Redmond, I talked about Dr. Redmond because it was just one example, and it was one of the early ones. I visited him in Gander, and he identified his clinic 3 oral cancers in just the first 3 months. These are folks that would not have been caught. These cancers would have almost certainly developed into something much more serious. So it's critically important, this program, and it's saving lives, and it is actually primary care.
Point of order for Mr. Doherty.
I just want to offer the minister an opportunity to clarify his response. He said that the patient that he was referring to had a pair of teeth.
Mr. Doherty, that's not a point of order. You'll have a chance to clarify the questions when you get the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue, Minister and Ms. Sidhu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, my next question is that I know the SUBSB has a funding to CIHI to support them improving performance indicator related to shared health priorities across the country. Data is incredibly important to ensure we have a consistent measurement. Why investing in health data is so integral for Canadians and for improving the healthcare system across Canada?
Right now, that's a great question. So right now, if you look at Europe, Europe is working collaboratively to eliminate any barriers for interoperability in their system and to have data that flows as free as rivers. And with the advent of AI and new technology, if we have a fragmented data system with data that's locked up in places that we can't get hold of, we're going to be run circles around. And it misses an opportunity of prevention that's absolutely outstanding. I'll talk about our good friend and colleague, former colleague Arnold Chan. Arnold, who was very close to all of us. He was somebody who reached across the aisle and loved this Parliament very deeply. And he was somebody who had a genetic form of cancer and didn't get caught early enough. But he was able to then tell his brother to get screened, and his brother found out that he had the same cancer. It saved his brother's life. In an interconnected data system, once we can sequence the human genome in the next couple of years and have that available to people, to be able to tell patients that they're genetically at risk for particular diseases is absolutely so powerful. And this is what Bill C-72 can unlock, you know, and I think it would be a wonderful legacy to think of Arnold and what this portends by passing that legislation. I hope that we do it. But it also means incredible things for reducing administrative burden, and maybe I'll talk about that for a second. You know, how frustrating it is to send the same form 3 or 4 times, to have information get lost in paper, to have not be the ability to send a prescription digitally, to have tools like AI Scribe, which can do some of the most menial work around taking notes and take it right off a doctor's shoulders. Do you know, if we have applied that across the system, that's equivalent to 1,000 doctors overnight, right, if we could put that in place. But we can't do that if we don't pass Bill C-72. So a lot of times data doesn't sound sexy, but the power of data to transform our health system is outstanding. Europe is doing it. We shouldn't waste a second. We got to do it as well. So I hope that we can pass it in this Parliament.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Sidhu. Suite, M. Thériault, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, did you send a directive to Sun Life since November 1st, or have you since November 1st, in order to stop requests for partial prosthetics? No, not at all. Thank you very much. Dentists in my riding in Quebec and seniors have come to see me to say that all requests had been refused. There was a survey of denturists in Quebec which showed that 99.4% of pre-authorizations for these prostheses are refused by Sun Life. A Sun Life employee stated to these people that the rare requests that are accepted are chosen haphazardly, randomly, and are not subjected to an analysis grid. And denturists have explained that they called Sun Life to try to understand refusals. They had received 15 refusals in a row, and the Sun Life employee stated that everything was fine with the requests, there were no mistakes, that Sun Life had everything it needed for the analysis, but that it could not accept these requests, and it was a directive coming from above. What's happening there,
Cheers,
Mr.
guys.
Minister, with your program? Can you have any control over it, and how do you explain that? You're talking about the dignity of seniors. These are the people who are targeted by these tools. Thank you for the question. This is a change in the system, and there are technical issues with how people are using it. I had a good conversation with the chief with denturists throughout the country, and it will take some time to solve the problem. But it's the same issues across the board, technical problems.
The beer's not as cold as I thought it
and
was.
we want to make it better. It is a temporary problem. We have already found ways to fix the problem. If I can say in English.
Back to this. This is the largest program in Canadian history in the beginning of November. I believe I still have about 10 seconds left. So I believe I have 10 seconds, Mr. Chair.
Freaking yelling into his mic.
We anticipated
Blow
this,
my
and we
ears
said
off.
that the pre-authorization process was deeply complicated, and that we needed folks to work with us. The head of the Denture Association, we had a great meeting. We were able to walk through the issues, talk about how we can get them solved. So I'm not concerned about that over the long term. I think I'm deeply committed to getting them fixed as quickly as possible. This is a different system, and so...
Come on. Je vais avoir du temps un peu pour parler, moi.
I want to have some time to speak, Mr. Chair. How can you explain that these requests made on the private side are approved, but they're not accepted by your regime? And people at Sun Life cannot tell denturists why a request for a partial denture is refused. It's not a technical problem, Mr. Minister. It's not.
The Bloc really doesn't like Sun Life.
It's people who are not competent, who are not able to properly analyze requests, applications. It's a private program, and people think that they will have access to a service, and then they're being billed, and a blockage regarding services. There's a clear problem with the system. How are you going to fix it, and when will you fix it? It's been in place for only a couple weeks. It's a new program, biggest program in the country. There's an issue.
Putting in the forms, making sure that they're aware of what forms they have to send in.
Okay.
Remember, these are extremely costly. We need to validate for taxpayers that the work that's being done needs to be done. This program has existed for 2 weeks. I would say give us another 2 weeks to work through it. We already have made huge progress. I can understand you wanting to fix it. I'm a little confused by your anger. C'est pas nécessaire d'être...
You don't have to be mad. I would like to suggest that you apply the same criteria for requests made on the private side. Sun Life has already had to deal with these cases with private health care. Why is the list as long as a highway? It's the first time that I'm getting the opportunity to discuss with you. We want to talk about the issues and the solutions. We want a clear solution. But when will it be fixed, Mr. Minister? As soon as possible. With the leader of the National Association, most of the issues have been solved. We understand the solution, but it's going to take a bit of time, not a long time. Because this program has only been in existence for 2 weeks. It's very new. Not for 2 weeks. For full dentures, it was going well. Now we have partial dentures, and all of a sudden, things go off the rails. How the interpreter regrets she can't interpret when 2 people are speaking at the same time. Why are these requests approved haphazardly? Thank you. Mr. Thériault, please give the minister the time to answer your question. With pre-authorizations, these are complex matters, and so verifications need to be done. I'm certain that the situation will be resolved. But with something so complex, we need to be sure that the system works correctly. Thank you, Mr. Minister and Mr. Thériault. Mr. Julian, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will carry on with the same line of questioning as Mr. Thériault. We know that it's quite a significant program in Quebec. How many Quebecers are using this dental care program that the NDP pushed for? How many Quebecers have received assistant surgeries through the program? And third question, how many requests are currently still waiting for a response? Thank you for the question.
These two need to get a room.
For people who were approved for services, there were 500,000 people in Quebec. That's a significant number of people. For the number of people who are registered, that's 1.2 million people. And on your second question, in most cases, there's no need for pre-authorization. And if there's no pre-authorization, there's no problem. When there's a pre-authorization, those cases are more rare, and there have been issues. We're still in the first 2 weeks, but I'm confident that the problem will be resolved shortly. And I will ask questions to the officials after.
The reality is I'm a little surprised by the questions for the official opposition. I mean, there is no doubt this is one of the most popular new federal programs in decades.
Holy Mike Loud.
Just from a count, what you've said, Minister, 3,700 on average Canadians in each and every Conservative riding in the country, including Mr. Doherty's and Dr. Ellis's, have received dental care. And what the NDP has fought for in terms of pharmacare means about 17,000 of their constituents. So it's a bit passing strange to me to see Conservatives threatening to kill programs that help thousands and thousands of their constituents. I don't understand that, but that's just a comment I wanted to express. In terms of where dental care goes from now, I do stress it's really important to extend it to others who meet the family income threshold beyond seniors and children and people with disabilities. When can we expect the government to look to coverage that would be for seniors who have existing dental programs that are very, very poor? That's a question that comes up from my constituents regularly. When do you expect to address the issue of Canadians who are denied dental care because they have a non-resident spouse? That's an issue as well that has come up. And in terms of the average response time for pre-approval for dentures, I would like to know what the existing response time is, in addition to the problem that Mr. Theriault raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, yes, I think in the first order, so 3 million people have signed up, already 1.25 million people getting care. The demand is absolutely massive, and I think we're going to be able to demonstrate in evidence not only what that means to people's dignity, but in terms of better health outcomes and frankly saving money so they don't wind up in emergency rooms with much more serious cases. And we do have a lot of people left to go. Almost every single senior who's eligible has signed up for this program. But you're right about the additional cohorts. Now, what I said always was that this was going to be a very big lift. The pre-authorization is extremely complex. And one of the reasons why I said we didn't want to advance the new cohorts until we got the pre-authorization piece right. So this was anticipated. Working through these issues, I think, is critical. What I say, it's less a question how long it's taking. What's happening with the rejected claims is either information isn't being attached or there's a misunderstanding of what's being required. Because if you can imagine, this is very expensive, and we have to be able to demonstrate that there's integrity built around the system, that we're not, by its nature, it's not just automatically approved because it's quite complicated work. So it's not that it's taking a lot of time, it's that there's pieces missing and that people understanding what they need to attach is the problem. So that's why I think we can work through that pretty carefully.
But my question was the average response time, if you have that, or if we officials
I'll get
have
back
that.
to you on that.
Okay.
It's less an issue, but I will get that. But certainly I will get it for you, yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of the issues of Canadians with a non-resident spouse who would otherwise qualify for this program that is
conservative round
been
after
so
this.
popular.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of your points are very fair. You mentioned seniors who have poor service on another plan, and you mentioned, folks who are denied because of non-resident spouse. So these are issues that we would require, obviously, additional policy cover for, would probably require legislation, and so that's something I would have to talk to you with your House Leader's hat on with both sides to talk about what's in the realm of the possible for us to be able to fix some of the gaps that I acknowledge exist today.
Okay, I've only got a few seconds left, so moving on to pharmacare, hugely important for people who pay $1,000 or $1,500 a month for their diabetes medication and devices. Nobody should oppose pharmacare. When do you see the first provinces signing on, and when do you see actually being able to provide that support to people right across the country, including, on average, 17,000 people in each and every Conservative riding?
Yeah, you bet. So I think, look, we came out of the Senate on October the 5th. So there's a lot of details to chew through, but very, very early in the new year, I expect to see the first agreement signed. I think you can look at the MOU with BC to get a flavor for what those would look like. They use the existing infrastructure of provinces, so I think we can get medicine to people very quickly. And as I said, I'm deeply encouraged that a jurisdiction like Alberta, as I say, last week I was in Alberta announcing our plan for drugs for rare diseases, and Alberta was saying that they're very interested in signing this and finding a solution, and that Adriana, as their health minister, believes it can be done. And I think if we can do it in Alberta, we can do it everywhere. I believe we will.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Julian. Next, Mr. Doherty, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, everything good?
Yes, sir.
You're okay?
Yourself?
I'm good. I'm right as rain. Just seemed to be a little bit on edge a little bit earlier on. But are you familiar with waiting your turn, wait times for healthcare in Canada, the report that was issued today?
I'm aware of it. I haven't had a chance to look at it. It was issued
today. Well, it's interesting because, Minister, it says that report reveals that out of 30 developed countries, Canada is ranked 28th in availability of doctors, 25th in hospital beds, 25th for psychiatric beds, 27th for MRI machines, and 28th for CT scanners. That's your record.
Actually, it's, I mean, I love how you don't hold Ford or any other government accountable for provincial health care. Health care is administered provincially. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. But we do try to...
Minister, I'm being respectful. You don't
No,
have
but
to
that wasn't respectful. You just said that it's something that's under provincial jurisdiction is our responsibility. That's not respectful.
Minister, that's your record.
But that's not true.
That is your record.
What are you asking about Doug Ford? What do you think the provincial government in Ontario should do?
Is Doug Ford in front of me right now? You're the Minister of Health.
Right. And so what we did is sign agreements with every province and every territory, $200 billion.
So out of 30 countries, you're happy with that?
That included metrics in every single... No, absolutely. Look, I am not happy or satisfied with where we are in healthcare. But the point is that we have one of the best health systems in the world, that when it comes to primary care, we can do much better, and we are. But provinces have to do their fair share, and not holding provinces to account is not responsible.
Mr. Doherty, please.
Minister, under your management of this file, 7 million Canadians are without a doctor. What have you done? What measurable steps have you done in the year and a half that you've been the Minister of Health to make sure that those 7 million or Canadians have access to nurses, to doctors? What have you done?
Well, I wish I had 20 minutes to answer that, because it's a very long answer. The first one starts with agreements with every province, every territory, $200 billion, common indicators across the system. With those common indicators, commitments on specifically doctors, nurses, and improvements in primary care. First High data out last year.
Canadians.
I believe I still have about 5 or 10 seconds.
Keep going.
So, the first High data showing baseline report last year shows every province, every jurisdiction, almost without exception, ahead in doctors and nurses. That when you take a look at the investments that we're making in that I just talked about, C72 or health data, I can't say it fast enough because I got so much to say on it. It's great news.
You have a mandate letter?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a continuation of the preceding mandate letter.
So, Minister, you've been in this role for a year and a half, and yet Canadians have yet to see what your mandate letter is. Who sets your priorities?
Well, I think at the beginning I enumerated my priorities very clearly. Pharmacare, dental care, data transformation. Where do you stand with Bill C-72? Where do you stand on dental care? Where do you stand on pharmacare?
This isn't time for you to ask questions.
How are you going to fix?
In a year's time, Minister, in a year's time, you'll have lots of time to ask all the questions.
No, I won't, because you'll still be in opposition, because you can't answer questions about what you're going to do for health care. No, what are you going to do on health care? How are you going to fix those problems? What is your policy solution?
Mr. Doherty, please.
Thank you.
What is your policy solution? Do you have any? No.
Minister, you're the one that's in power right now. You've been in power for 9 years.
What is your solution?
And yet we're failing in every
metrics,
Minister.
Your solution
a year and
is
a half.
cuts.
Stop him. Chair, come on.
Cuts are going to bring down
Point of order.
Minister, please allow him to pose the question. Go ahead, Mr. Doherty.
You're so disrespectful. And weak. And you can stare at me all you want. Like I've been mean mug me all you want. But Minister, the rates of scurvy are on the rise. Yet you're taking off the GST on pop and chips and candies, but you are raising the cost of everything healthy with your carbon tax. What's your rationale for that?
A, it doesn't increase the cost. B, if you cared about scurvy, then you'd be talking about initiatives in First Nations communities. The scurvy you're speaking about is in rural, remote communities. The policies that you have to deal with that are exactly nil. And I find it, yes, I'm very frustrated, Mr. Doherty, that the Conservatives would talk about issues like poverty. You know, I was in opposition. I watched you never talk about poverty. You never set poverty guidelines. You have no policies or ideas on poverty. In fact, your cuts will do devastating things to the very issues you're talking about. And I think it is dishonest and disingenuous when you have no solution.
Mr. Doherty, please.
Mr. You're the only one that's talking about Conservative cuts. The only thing that we're talking about is axing the tax for everyone forever. That'll make life more affordable for all Canadians. The only one that is spewing rhetoric and garbage are the Liberals and the NDP, their coalition partners. So if you want to start telling the truth, that'd be a novel idea.
So let's start with scurvy.
Minister, no, it's my time, not yours.
Thank you.
So, I didn't. So, Minister, over 47,000 Canadians have lost their lives due to the opioid crisis. Okay. You've spent your government has spent $1 billion on failed policies.
Your time is up. Get to your question. We'll let him answer it, and then we'll move on.
Minister, what's your comments to people like Brianna McDonald's family that all they've asked for is for this government to stop their
Mr. Doherty, you're
decriminalization and their failed
25
drug
seconds
policies.
over time. Minister, please take 30 seconds to answer the question, then we'll move.
Thank you. In the first order, any person, and I know that you would share it in my heart, and you would share it in yours, that anybody who loses a family member is devastating. And we need to use science, data, evidence to provide solutions, not emotions and not fake policies. So we have to provide real answers, and that's what we will offer, true science-based, evidence-based decisions to save people's lives. And if you take scurvy, and I'll just finish on this because you want to talk about facts, somebody who's so food insecure that they have scurvy doesn't drive around a car. They don't pay carbon tax, but you would take away their check. You would take away the benefit that they get every single quarter that helps them pay for groceries. That's what you would do.
Thank you, Minister.
So you would leave them less secure and in a more vulnerable position. Sir, those are the facts.
Thank you, Minister. We're going to try Dr. Hanley again. I think you got the thumbs up on the sound check. Okay,
Yes,
you
I
have the
think
floor
it's
for
on.
5 minutes.
Again.
Apologies to the committee for my
Apparently,
technical
we need to
problems.
do Dr. Hanley, we need to do a sound check. Go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Hanley, can you please
this is the sound.
talk about
This is the
the
sound
head of
check?
it? Yeah, this is the sound check.
Am I good to go?
You can continue
Okay.
talking, please.
I'm just talking to you from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin, and I'm hoping that this time the sound is working well.
Yes, the sound is working. Thank you.
Now you have
Okay,
5
very
minutes.
good. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And my apologies to the committee for my technical problems. I do want to note that I want to reserve the final 2 minutes of my 5 minutes for Mr. Morris to ask an important question. So please, Mr. Chair, assist me in that. Thank you, Minister and officials, for appearing. I did want to ask a couple of questions. The first is in the supplementary estimates, there's $53 million to devote to increased support for scholarships and fellowship awards. I hear a lot about the need for more investment in health research and particularly in postgraduate research. I wonder if you'd like to speak briefly to the importance of that from your point of view, Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hanley. And of course, we know that research is absolutely fundamental to health transformation. It is the pathway to understanding how we deal with the problems that face us in a complicated world. There isn't a health system that isn't facing these challenges in the world. And so I was so happy, as I know, Mr. Hanley, you were in the budget 2024 when we responded to the Bouchard report's recommendations to make sure that for postgraduate and graduate students that we have the appropriate supports for them to be able to study here and to be able to call Canada home for the research that they do. Research leads to miracles. It is very much the responsibility of, it really is thanks to research that we have been able to make the kind of progress we are. And I just give you one example. We talked earlier about diabetes. You know, type 1 diabetes, Canada is perhaps 3 to 5 years away from being the country that solves type 1 diabetes. And it is because of the extraordinary researchers in this country. So making sure the next generation of researchers have the support that they need is critical. So that money that was in the supplementary estimates to that end to further those goals is critical, not just to keep researchers here so that science is here, so that jobs are here, but so the solutions of tomorrow that end the diseases of today are driven and done here in Canada.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to Mr. Morris so that he has time to ask.
It's like two blind mice trying to lead each other in the
interchange
kitchen.
on this important topic. Thank you.
It's ridiculous listening to
Mr.
liberals
Morris?
ask liberal questions.
Thank
We're
you,
getting the
Dr.
Green
Hanley,
Party.
and thank you, Chair. Mr. Holland, you might remember we spoke in Parliament earlier this year about a constituent of mine, Noor Aisha. She'd received a terminal diagnosis of bile duct cancer just after giving birth to her daughter back in February of 2023. She and her family and donors on GoFundMe had to raise money to fund a drug that had been approved by Health Canada but not recommended by the Canadian Drug Agency. It's a drug that cost $15,000 a month that extended her life. Sadly, Noor passed away about a month ago. The glimmer of hope is that the CDA is now in the midst of reconsidering its decision for a possible recommendation, as myself and more importantly, her own oncologist and other doctors had been calling for. I'm sure, as you also know, the Canadian Cancer Society released a report this week that shows the average cancer patient in Canada is grappling with nearly $33,000 in costs over the course of their lifetime. I'm sure that saddens you the same way it does me. And so I wonder what you can do, even commit to, in terms of streamlining approvals and funding decisions to speed up access to cancer drugs.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. And I want to thank you for your advocacy on this, and to say that the Newar's case is deeply tragic and is something that lights a fire in us to do everything that we can for action. So 2 quick points. Health Canada, once it approves that a drug is going to be eligible for public reimbursement, it's then up to the provinces that make the decision about whether or not it is publicly reimbursed. So sorry, Health Canada approves it, then the provinces decide if it's eligible for reimbursement. The arm's length decision of the Canadian Drugs Agency is important. Obviously, we want those science-based decisions to not be influenced by politics. But the agreements that we're signing with drugs for rare diseases are so critical. I was so excited to sign the 3rd one in Alberta because it's a collective commitment to expand our action on drugs for rare diseases and to show a coordinated approach to these diseases, because you take cancer and there's costs and we got to do a much better job. But it's pretty incredible in this country when you walk into the cancer ward of a hospital. It used to be 30 years ago, I talked to a doctor there. When she started 30 years ago, the survival rate was only 30%. Today it's 90%. And when I talk to those patients, in fact, I talked to one patient just talking about the experience of an American family member who they just got wiped out entirely, lost everything because of a cancer diagnosis. That's not our case here. It's still too expensive. We have to do better. But I think seeing people where they are and recognizing the urgency of the devastating thing that does to families, because look, it's bad enough to get a diagnosis, but then to wonder how the heck you're going to pay for your medication is just fundamentally unfair. So we got to go as fast and as far as we can, and thank you for the question.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Morris. Suite, Mr. Thériault, pour 2 minutes et demie.
So I'm assuming they're getting close to the hour here.
You talked about
probably about 10 minutes left.
2 weeks.
And then we'll switch over to the other committee.
It's not only a matter of 2 weeks. People were waiting from November 1st to have access to services. It's the 12th of December. So the math isn't mathing. You've stated that...
Estimated that increase...
I was just pulling up the other committee.
This dental care seemed to be... And it seemed to be written on the corner of a napkin. Honestly. There are people...
corner of a napkin.
who think that it's free. People arrive at the dentist. They realize that they have to pay. And many have said to me that dentist fees have almost doubled. Why did you not take the time to sit with dentists, negotiate fees, instead of letting Canadians deal with a humiliating situation where they don't have the money to pay for care, and you're told at the end of the day, no, it's not actually free, you're going to have to pay the difference? How are you going to take control of this? People who are taking the government's contribution as a gift card.
You've been against the Canadian Dental Care Program. People have no coverage. So now you're saying that them paying a small fee is terrible when you're saying they should pay, they had no coverage. 500,000 people had care in Quebec. You're dismissing it like it's nothing. 500,000. 500,000.
500,000 people. That's extraordinary. That's good news. And that's not just in Quebec. Please just answer the question instead of sharing propaganda. Monsieur Thériault, you took more than a minute to ask your question. So the minister has enough time. Well, then give me 5 minutes to ask my questions.
No, you only get 2 minutes because there's only so much time left, ma'am.
You have 15 seconds left. Well, just answer the questions then, instead of sharing your propaganda. You didn't implement this regime well. There are people who don't have access to care that they expected to have access to. And you're saying, well, it's a matter of 2 weeks. It's something that will be resolved. You can't tell us when. I find that writing up a program on a napkin on the corner of the table. I don't agree with
table
you.
napkin.
You only have 20 seconds to answer, Minister.
500,000 people got care. That's just over 6 months. And you're saying it's on a napkin. You're saying that you dismiss it like it's nothing. And then your position is to not have them get care. And then you're angry that they're not getting care fast enough. And then you're saying pre-authorization isn't being fixed, but you're against having pre-authorization. So you would take away right now, tens of thousands of people in Quebec, tens of thousands have got dentures. This is great news. And instead of celebrating that, you're attacking it and saying get rid of the whole darn program because it's taking a couple of weeks to fix a couple of technical problems. That's not logical to me.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Julian, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it'll be difficult for the Bloc to defend a position that would eliminate a dental care program, and the NDP pushed for that, and 500,000 Quebecers have already had access to these services.
Provinces, particularly conservative provinces, that are undermining healthcare. British Columbia, we have a very strong province. I took my neighbor to the emergency ward. We had to wait for an hour. In Doug Ford's, Ontario, last week I was in, and I'm being interrupted and heckled by the Conservatives because, and that's
Mr. Doherty,
are you okay, Todd?
That is,
okay?
and nobody tried to interrupt you when you did. Go ahead, Mr. Julian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, in going to the emergency ward at Ottawa Civic last week after a bicycle accident, it was 14 hours. And Mr. Doherty thinks that's great, and so does Dr. Ellis. Conservative provinces have been terrible on healthcare outcomes, terrible on extra billing. And I want to know what actions you're taking as health minister and the government is taking against this extra billing and the erosion of our healthcare system, particularly in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, which are the worst offenders and have absolutely terrible health outcomes, terrible waiting lists, and terrible healthcare systems undermined by Conservative politicians.
Well, and look, it takes everybody moving in the same direction. And it's not enough that the federal government does its part. Obviously, hospitals and health systems are actually managed by provinces, so it's hugely consequential whether or not they make the appropriate investments, and you're absolutely right in that. I think one of the things that I would point to is the agreements that we signed with provinces. You know, for the first time, there were conditions, there was tailored bilateral agreements, there was common indicators. CIHI just had their baseline data. When it comes out next year, we're actually going to be able to see in data rather than anecdote which provinces are making the advances and which ones are not. And I think, you know, it's very interesting. Manitoba, Nova Scotia, BC, these elections turned on healthcare. People care deeply about this. So I think there is certainly a major electoral consequence to it. We have used the Canada Health Act in many different instances to charge provinces when they're charging private fees. But this is a major topic. We have a health ministers meeting coming up, and I would rather get there through collaboration. Obviously, that's the preferred goal. I've had a very good conversation, as an example, with Jane Philpott in Ontario around the work that she's doing in primary care. I think that there's, you know, Michelle Thompson, who I was talking to, sharing messages, you know, she's got some great ideas in new Conservative jurisdiction on how they can improve their health system. There's no reason for this to be, you know, just because a government is Conservative, they don't need to take the federal Conservative position of cuts and attacking the health system. There's a way that we can work together collaboratively, and I think that's what we should do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Julian. Next, Ms. Goodridge, please, for 5 minutes.
And then I think that's it. There might be another round just because they started
Minister,
late.
We had BC RCMP Assistant Commissioner Wilnig come into Health Committee about 6 months ago. He was talking about the very serious concerns about how 80% of the precursor chemicals used in fentanyl production are still legal and unregulated in Canada. Why has Health Canada been dragging its feet for the last 2.5 years to do anything on this?
Well, I think one of the greatest concerns with this is a lot of these precursor chemicals are used in normal legal commercial enterprises. So it's very hard to stop some of this because a lot of what's being used can be found in legal products. So, but I deeply share this. This is one of the things that's being worked on very actively now as we have a conversation with our American counterparts. How do we do this together? And I think a North America approach where we're working collaboratively across North America makes full and complete sense.
So because the U.S. finally has said this is enough's enough, you are finally going to take action. You've been in government for 9 years. Why won't you actually take immediate action to make sure that Canadians are safe? Canadians are dying every single day. 22 Canadians are dying from addiction every single day under your watch.
So the problem with fentanyl is that it is so insidious. It is so easy to manufacture, to hide, to send, and so it is so devastating. And we have absolutely been taking every action that we can to both block the precursors. I explained the complication with a lot of them being legal, and also to take action to stop the supply. That's nothing new about working with the United States. It's about trying to have a conversation with a new administration about how we collaborate better. But the action that we've been taking is doing everything that we can on the basis of evidence and science, and I can assure you that I care about it every bit as much as you do.
Ms. Goodrich.
So what Canadians can hear from what you've just said is you're doing nothing and you're okay with that. So back to this whole conversation around scurvy. Food inflation has increased 36% higher in Canada than it has in the US, which means the carbon tax that you guys continue to jack up, and you plan on jacking up again come this spring, is going to further make food more expensive. Canadians are now getting scurvy. Your plan to remove tax for a couple months on Chiefs Puffs and chips. Why not make healthy food more attainable so that Canadians can eat?
So as I just explained, scurvy is existing in communities of extreme food insecurity, mostly Indigenous. These people don't have cars. They're not driving around. They pay no carbon tax, but they do get a carbon rebate. Your policy would be to take the rebate away from them. I can guarantee taking cash away from somebody is not going to help them not have scurvy. And I would ask, what are your policies? I can tell you what our policies are around food insecurity. And then the second thing I would say, can you tell us whether or not you support vaccinations? Full stop. Because a lot of misinformation around vaccinations and a lot of misinformation around diseases cause problems. And I've been trying to say that we should have a unified view on these issues.
Stop him from talking.
Quite respectfully, most of these communities that are seeing scurvy increase are in the north, where they do in fact have to pay carbon tax to heat their house, to keep the electricity on. That's a bill they see every single month as a direct result of your government's policies. And frankly, it's really rich for you coming from a Southern Ontario area to be sitting here lecturing me on what food insecurity looks like in the north, someone that lives north. So I'm sorry, Minister, this is absolutely part of the problem. If you guys just got rid of the carbon tax, people could afford to heat, eat, and house themselves. Why won't you take the carbon tax off?
Because that's disingenuous and untrue. That the people that you're talking about who are so food insecure that they have scurvy are almost exclusively in Indigenous communities. These are people of very limited means that are not paying next to anything in terms of carbon tax.
So you're okay with that?
What I'm saying, what I'm not okay,
scurvy?
I don't know if I'm allowed to finish.
Yes,
if I'm allowed to finish, the point that I'm making is that these people get way more back in a rebate check that they can use for food insecurity. You would take that away from them. So in other words, you would, in terms of a price on pollution, you would eliminate the action on pollution and protecting our climate, and you would then take away money that they get where they would be left in an even more insecure situation. And I think that's disingenuous to saying somebody who's suffering that you're going to take away money that they need.
What have you done to improve the people that are getting scurvy today? What has your government done to make sure that Canadians are not getting scurvy?
Just a short answer, Mr. Please.
So the first thing is we've tripled investments in First Nations communities and are taking historic action in First Nations communities. Those are way over the levels that were there under the Conservatives. And I can tell you the number of boiled water advisories in those communities and poor health outcomes were much worse under Conservatives and would be again with the cuts that you would visit upon them. In terms of the country writ large, things like the school food program, things like making sure that women have access to child care so that they can afford child care, making sure that people get the savings that come from dental care and pharmacare. That's real help.
Thank you.
Making cuts isn't going to help any of those people.
Thank you, Minister. The last round of questions for you will come from Mr. Nakfi for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome, Minister, and to our officials as well, and we shall be speaking with you soon. I want to start also on the theme of research. I think Mr. Dr.
Okay, just to let you guys know, we have 5 minutes left in this committee, and then we're switching over to another committee for an hour, and we're going to be covering the RCMP and CBSA, talking about Trump and what they're doing to fix the border. So just a couple minutes left of this committee. We got to listen to this Yahoo, and then we'll switch over.
In that respect, I want to sort of, in particular, want to talk about brain research. In the supplements, there's a $10 million in funding for Canada Brain Research Fund to advance knowledge on the brain diseases and disorders, and accelerates discoveries for improving the health and quality of life of Canadians affected by brain disease. Why is this funding into this research area critical in your view? And before you answer this, I do also want to put on record that our colleague Alistair McGregor, who brought in Bill C-277 that went through this House, and he sought unanimous consent in the House so that it could pass, was denied UC by the Conservatives, which was rather partisan, because we heard clearly from so many witnesses the need for a brain research framework in Canada, which we're looking forward to working once it passes into law. So question again, but we're moving ahead with this research funding. Why is it so critical to support research when it comes to brain in Canada and globally?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Naqvi. And I think that you're absolutely right. It was unfortunate that it was voted against the support for brain research. This is absolutely critical for a wide array of neurological conditions. And I think when you meet patients, one of the hardest things, these are the types of things that stay with you afterwards, long into the night. Meeting patients who know that research is so close to giving them answers to get back their lives and to be lifted out of the pain they're in or the condition they may have. And they so desperately want us to make these investments. And I would suggest it's an area where we really could put down the partisan swords. I think I mentioned another one, which is C-72 on interoperability of data. Again, I'm not aware of any opposition to these things. And yet they're not supported because there seems to be a view to being against everything is the job of an official opposition. I just don't agree with that. I think I did spend time in 2 terms in opposition where you try to advocate for solutions and ideas. And I think Parliament in this minority government has gotten a ton done. And yes, on research. We are in a time of miracles, and we need to press just a little bit further so that the people who are afflicted with diseases and conditions can be elevated and live their best lives. And it's a roll of the dice. It could happen to any one of us. And I think all of us would hope that if one of the people that we loved or ourselves had a condition visited upon us, that we had a country that was doing everything it could to find solutions and invest in the science and the data and the evidence to find answers.
I agree with you, Minister. And I'll be frank with you. I think Conservatives have been really disappointing. I mean, they only have slogans. They stand in the way of progress. They have an agenda of cuts, and they prove it again and again every single time.
Okay,
and they just
small little
violin
violin
for power, and that's it. And they've lost the purpose around really serving Canadians and finding ways to working together. And we see that, and I see this in this committee, just insults, long, frivolous speeches, on and on it goes. Anyways. I want to come back to Canada Dental Care Plan because I think that's really exciting. I continue to meet with seniors in my community right here in Ottawa Centre who are telling me that they are finally getting a chance to go see a dentist or a denturist and getting the care they need for a long, long period of time. I'm sure you're hearing those stories as well. Tell us where we are at. What are the next steps when it comes to CDCP? Because there are many others also in my community who want access to this program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so let's talk about seniors first. When we were there announcing the 1 million mark, 1 million people connected to care, there was a gentleman who was at the clinic we were at who came up to me and he said, a lot of years ago, I had to get a tooth pulled and it cost $700. And he said, you know what, I didn't go back. I had problems in my mouth. I was terrified to walk in. I knew I couldn't afford it. I was afraid to get care. And he said, and now I'm getting care again. I'm not afraid to go into the dentist. This is what this is about. People being connected to the care that they need and not having to be afraid that they're not going to be able to afford it, not being terrified when they get a pain in their mouth, whether or not it's going to lead to some devastating outcome that they can't afford and they have to wait to be in an emergency room to fix. I hear stories of seniors. You know, when I was talking to a mobile smile clinic in Windsor, Navjeet was telling me about seniors setting up their family photographs once they got their dentures in, and how it's transforming their life and the joy that it gave them. I'll tell you, you know, we're all going to exit this earth, but we're certainly.
You know how they get mad at conservatives using people as props? Talk about this guy using people as props, man.
Is absolutely critical, and we have a lot more people to go. We're going to get there. We're going to do it as fast as we can.
And every single step of the way, Conservatives have voted against that program.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for staying longer than was scheduled. That brings us to the end of this round of questions. You're welcome to stay, but you're free to leave. Colleagues, I don't propose to suspend the meeting. We have a budget for the supplementary estimates that I would like.
Okay, so that's it for that meeting. And as I told you guys, we're going to switch over to the RCMP and CBSA and another committee because Holland's leaving. So we just basically wanted to cover Holland for the first hour.
It's my understanding it's actually a life sentence, but we can certainly follow up with justice in terms of that. In terms of some of the precursor, Commissioner, you mentioned about the reverse onus. Are there other countries with that? Because that would also then help if we have pretty strong sentences regarding the trafficking of precursors. And if there are additional legislative proposals that would have a reverse onus, then those would be pretty strict penalties together. Do you have examples of how that reverse onus kind of approach looks like, what that looks like, and if there are other countries currently doing something similar?
Just a brief response. We're over time.
You would have to look at the process when the precursors are imported into Canada, and then look at how they are collected by the person who imported them, and see what we could do to tighten up and reverse the onus on the person as to why do you need these drums. Background checks. Some of the background checks are already done on the companies, but I think there's something to be done where we can tighten that up.
Thank you very much, Ms. Michaud, for 2.5 minutes.
Oh wow, Dancho's actually the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We talk a lot about the government plan to deal with this 25% tariff threat, but this is a plan that goes both ways. And during the last election campaign, pledges were made. He said that this was an emergency plan and that he was going to use the American army to expel people who enter U.S. illegally. He also said in a press release that he would talk about this is going to be the biggest deportation that's ever taken place on American soil. More than 60,000 people had asked for asylum in Canada. Today, in the United States, there are about 11,000 people who have no status whatsoever, and there are hundreds of thousands who are going to have their visas expire in the months that lie ahead. He talked to do away with the policy on undocumented aliens. He talked about immigrations coming from other countries to force other countries to repatriate people who have been expelled, and that he would replace the system with another new system. And there are other elements that I won't go into all of that, but I do have the impression that we're going to see a huge number of people who are going to try to enter Canada, and we know that a plan is going to be released next week, but I would imagine that you're going to have to consult various organizations to find out what could you be recommending, and often I don't want to give you the impression we think that nothing's been done up until now about this, but I would imagine that with these types of situations, other additional measures can be taken. You're going to be given this additional $1 billion. Could you, Ms. O'Gorman, can you talk about recommendations that you made to the minister?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We consulted.
Precise advice, but certainly additional resources in all of our business lines would yield increased outcomes. Alors, c'est pas mal évident, mais plus de personnes pour...
That's obvious. More people can to look at imports, exports. People talked about technology that we could use to intercept people or detect people. We can do more, and certainly the minister did consult us about these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to ask on that particular subject point, you know, when the incoming president, Mr. Trump, has, you know, he's referred to using the U.S. military to enforce measures regarding the deportation of people who've entered the U.S. irregularly. I guess in practical terms, like, what are the consequences for Canada if he follows through? Like, do you have some projections on what that would actually mean? Would our immigration detention centers be up to the task? I just want to know, like, if he is actually going to follow through, what does that mean for Canada? Like, how many people do you perceive might actually come our way? Because the United States says they are not our problem anymore and they need to leave.
So the safe third country is in place, and as my colleague said, we implement it every day. And so every day people come to the ports of entry to seek asylum. We process them, and if they qualify for one of the few exemptions, then they come into the country, into the asylum system. So we are prepared for a surge, but recognize the safe third.
May I ask, do you have a figure attached to that surge? Like, do you roughly speak, do you know how many that would result in coming
No,
back
because
to Canada?
it would mean knowing, one, the number of people who would want to come to Canada, two, those who would qualify for an exception. And so that's just a bit unknowable. The exceptions include a family member, if you're a minor, if you're a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, and like are the detention centers, the three that we have, are they up to the task? I mean, like, are you going to have to rely on provincial prisons for people that you believe are a flight risk? Like, we just want to know.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot your
These are
question.
human beings. We want to make sure that they are going to be treated with dignity, respect, and have all the resources afforded to them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so just in every day, a very small number of people who seek asylum in Canada are subject to detention.
Okay.
13,000 who are subject to detention are subject to alternatives to detention, which is to say bracelets, reporting. So the small number who are detained based on a decision by the Immigration and Refugee Board are held in our IHCs. We regret having lost access to provincial detention facilities so quickly before we could build the infrastructure, but we are retrofitting our infrastructure to be able to take on that task. So
Thank you very
I don't
much.
expect the level of detention would necessarily change from what it is today.
Thank you, Ms. O'Gorman. Mr. Lloyd for 5 minutes.
Thank you. How many, to the RCMP, how many people do you estimate are involved in the production and distribution of fentanyl in Canada? Do you have like a ballpark estimate? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people?
This is a good question.
I don't have a ballpark figure on it.
So you have no idea how many people could possibly be involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada?
There's a significant group, significant number of organized crime group, but if you're asking me for a specific number, I can't give you a specific number.
How many organized crime groups are involved?
Over 4,000 organized crime groups in Canada, as assessed by the Criminal Intelligence Service Canada.
4,000 individual organized crime groups, all with their own distinct leadership and membership?
4,000.
That's stunning. Now, we heard during the auto theft study from Ontario Provincial Police that oftentimes when they're catching people in the act of stealing cars or as a result of their investigations, that it's often people that they've already been interacting with, people that they've caught previously. In fact, many of these people were out on bail. Are you finding in your fentanyl investigations, when you're cracking down on these labs and you're having these great busts that we like to see, and catching people, are these people that are known to law enforcement generally, or are they people that have had no interaction with law enforcement before?
Go ahead. I'm happy to take it. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the question. Yes, it's fair to say that organized crime individuals are not individuals that have been arrested only once. We deal with the same individuals and groups very often.
So you would say that in the majority of cases that the people that you're catching in these things are repeat offenders?
That's fair to say, yeah.
Now, in a previous parliament under this Liberal government, Bill C-5 reduced a number of mandatory minimum penalties, and some of these mandatory minimum penalties were related to drug trafficking and the import and export of drugs. And these Schedule I drugs include fentanyl. So we're seeing, as a result of legislation like this, that people who are involved in this deadly fentanyl trade are getting back out on the streets more quickly, and obviously you guys are catching them again in the act. It's clear that mandatory minimum penalties, by keeping these drug pushers in prison for longer, hopefully acts as a deterrent for them continuing that activity, but at least it takes them off the street. How quickly do you find like the time period between these criminals getting out on bail or getting out on the street that you're catching them? Is it like years, like 10 years later that they're getting caught, or are you finding it's more frequent?
So it'd be speculative on my part as to say when they get back in. They're released, most of the times they're released under strict conditions. Some obey the conditions, some don't obey the conditions. And to put a specific timeline as to when they get back involved in organized crime is hard to put a quantified number.
But it wouldn't be a huge amount of time. We could be talking in some cases days, some cases months, maybe in some cases years, but certainly there's a wide spectrum of cases.
I would agree that there's a wide spectrum, as you covered, from days to years to several years.
Anyways, yeah, because I agree. We could shut down all the labs we want, but if we're not shutting down the people that are setting up the labs, then we're not going to be very effective we need to shut down the people that are involved. What can we do to get these people behind bars so that they're not out there pushing these drugs that are killing members of our communities? What can we do better?
So I would answer, I think there's multiple avenues here. One is how do we stop the precursors or slow the precursors from coming into the country? I do think that we need a strong outreach program to inform the Canadian public of the harm of fentanyl. And the other one is sharing information that is ongoing with law enforcement.
It's killed, I don't want to correct you because I agree with you, but it has killed more people in Canada than died in the Second World War, than Canadians that died in the Second World War, this fentanyl opioid overdose crisis. So I think many Canadians know that this is a deadly epidemic that has killed people in my family, has killed people in many families across Canada. It's devastating. And
I'm sorry to hear that, Lloyd.
I hope that you will get the resources and get the legal backing to be able to continue doing your work and cracking down on these people, because we cannot allow this to continue. As we've seen with this study, it's now costing us our international reputation, and so I support you in the work you're doing, and I only hope that you get all the tools that you need to get that job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. And I'll just follow up because I don't believe you answered this question, Commissioner, so just using my chair's prerogative. Would stiffer penalties for drug traffickers and importers be an effective tool to combat this issue?
I would say it's one tool to combat the issue, stiffer penalties for sure.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Sheehan, for 5 minutes, please.
I won't touch that button again. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this important study that you've undertaken. I represent Sault Ste. Marie, the riding thereof, a border town. You know, I'm also a steel town as well. And so, you know, studying Trump's tariff threat because of the border, I don't accept that premise that we're a problem, as I didn't accept that we're a problem with the 232 tariffs. Like, I open up my windows when I wake up in the morning, I can see the United States, and there wasn't any gun turrets or barbed wire or protected. But fast forward to today, you know, when I take a look at the investments that we have done at our border, just in Sault Ste. Marie, because we cross every day. I went to school in Michigan. Lake Superior State University, I crossed every single day, and I saw how well the border functioned, and the sharing of information between America and the United States. When I go to the United States, they know what I potentially have done, which I've done nothing, but that kind of sharing of information. And, I remember one time when I was at Lake State, I had a Chevy Chevette full of my American friends. We pulled up to our border crossing, and we were waiting in line. And one of the Americans said, "Oh, man, wouldn't it be great if we're all just one big country?" And I quickly said back to him, he said, "Sure, it'd be great having one prime minister." And then the ensuing discussion started. But that border crossing then has totally changed. I recently cut the ribbon on a $51 million investment at the Sioux border, which made the facility larger, bigger inspection rooms, more lanes, areas for the staff to work in. My question through you, Chair, to our fine friends here is, that's one example, but could you please share with the examples of some of the investments in facilities? But that's not, and I've also toured afterwards and saw the new equipment being put in there, the X-ray machines, the stuff that identify the drugs, that the officers can identify right away, and as well as the training that takes place. So if you wouldn't mind just putting on record the investments that we've actually done to continue to work closely with our Americans and protect our borders.
Sure. So CBSA is in the process of a $480 million infrastructure improvement across our land ports of entry. And so we have finished several of them, Fraser, Bloomfield, St. Orly. You mentioned already the new equipment in Sault Ste. Marie. And we're in the process of getting ready to do St. Bernard de la Colle and early work around Pacific Highway. We are looking and talking to the Americans about a joint facility in Beaver Creek and looking to see what that would look like. And then we also have additional detection equipment across the country, quite a long list, small and large detector dog teams. But the infrastructure projects that have been done, we've been aligning them with the Americans, hoping to not kind of build vastly different scales, and then would have to take the opportunity to point out the Gordie Howe Bridge and getting ready for that to open and finishing touches on there as well.
And what kind of training, that you could highlight for the committee that, our officers undertake? Again, the place I went to university, they educated a lot of police officers, both in the United States and Canada. A lot of border officers, either Canadian or American, went to school together. What kind of continuous improvement and training? Because we have the infrastructure, the facilities, we have the equipment, but we also rely on officers to do what they do to identify, and they do quite a good job.
Absolutely. So an excellent introductory training program that spans several months at our campus in Rigaud, and then training throughout, but continually sharing intelligence and information. So what an officer will uncover in a secret compartment that you need to kind of press 4 buttons before it will open will be shared with officers across the country to look out for the same thing. So a lot of the training they do is just unrelentingly looking at different ways people are trying to conceal contraband as they cross the border.
And you mentioned about the sniffer dogs. That's like old tech, if you will. They've been around for a while, but they still play a very important role. I know we have one at the border in the Sioux as well. What's that program doing? Are you looking at, and not just, I'll talk about the old tech and the new tech. What are the plans for the future about investing in the border? I know that the minister is looking at announcing something, but are you able to share anything with the committee right now?
Not in terms of the announcement this week. I will say, just off of your comment, I think detector dogs are old technology, but they will have a place for the foreseeable future. I mean, barring any kind of new technology that we haven't thought of, but just in terms of the places they can get into and how quickly they can do their jobs. So I don't foresee us, like I said, not needing our detector dogs. But certainly we're always looking at new equipment. Both...
Sorry, Ms. O'Gorman, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I apologize for just a bit over time. Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. We'll go to Mr. Motz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to change gears from my last, and if I line of questioning, if I got time, I'll come back to it. Recently, the Minister of Public Safety was here and indicated to this committee that he's working on a plan to strengthen our borders. And Commissioner, you had indicated as well that it was, reported in the National Post that you had presented the government with a plan to bolster the country's border security. Can you kind of describe what that plan looks like from the RCMP perspective? And I also want to ask Mr. Gorman, for both of you, like, what developments have been made since the minister's meeting with us here a couple weeks ago on the plan, and what is it looking like, and how is it rolling out, and what does it look like moving forward?
So for us, what we've briefed the minister on is really to increase our capabilities when it comes to technology, evergreening technology that we have, increasing our resources, and this has already been said by the minister publicly, and having more ability when it comes to surveillance with by means of drones or helicopters. There is an appetite also to, as what I said, when increase the resources, we have to be mindful that like any other organization, we have limited resources, but how can we benefit from maybe other organizations by working together and having additional people at the border?
Actually, that would be almost the same answer I would give, insofar as that we are working extremely closely on a day-to-day basis with the RCMP as we carry out our mandate at ports of entry, and the RCMP does it in between. And so the extent to which they benefit from technology, we know what new technology is out there and how that would help us increase the amount of seizures that we're able to.
Okay, fair enough. So if I'm hearing you correctly, there's not necessarily a specific plan other than we're going to capitalize on some evergreen technology that we already have. We're going to maybe put some more boots on the ground there. We're going to use some other technologies like drones or those sort of activities along the border. Has there, is there a plan to develop bilateral agreements with the United States and partner in some of those border processes? I mean, I'm not seeing, the minister says we've got a plan, or we're going to develop a plan, and yet, we're bolstering a plan we already have, or we're doing something even bolder than we're doing now.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I would leave it to the minister to announce his plan, and as he said, he's consulted the provinces. But just I have to respond to your comment about agreements with the U.S., just because I don't want it to be understood that we don't have them.
Right.
We have them, information sharing, and we're increasing them and operationalizing them. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that we do absolutely have agreements, multiple agreements with Customs and Border Protection, with the DEA, with the ATF, with HSI, sorry for the acronyms, but I suspect you know what they are.
Yeah.
So those agreements are well in place.
So, I mean, as part of the plan, and I don't know whether the minister has, apparently he's had conversations with provinces. Was part of the plan to include or have provinces step up, like Alberta made the announcement this afternoon, putting resources, manpower, technology, and other things on the border, spending $30 million to augment the resources there along in Alberta. Other provinces, I understand, are looking at doing also similar things along the border. Is that part of the plan that the government is talking about? Can any of you speak to that?
I can't speak about the conversation that the minister has had with his counterparts in different provinces. What I can say is that public safety at the deputy minister's level has a weekly call. Aaron and I are on the call with deputy ministers from across the country, and throughout the calls, there's a strong appetite to see how they can help. And the Premier of Alberta announcing that they are looking at mobilizing 51 officers. We welcome that. Obviously, as I said earlier in the committee, this is a shared responsibility, and we all want what's best for Canadians and ensure that there's a safe and secure border. So go ahead.
So, sorry, Commissioner, that's great, and I applaud the Premier of Alberta for moving that direction. Now, how do you plan with CBSA and the RCMP, who also patrol and are part of the border security there on a very vast border? I might say, because I have all the border crossings there that matter in Alberta. how do you intend to incorporate so that you're not working against each other? So you share intel, you communicate together, you are on operations together. How do you plan on doing that?
Just a very brief answer, please.
Oh, sorry.
No different how we're doing it right now in the province of Quebec, where we're joined to the hip with Les Sautés Quebec, and we're collaborating together and we share the information. You might have joint teams, joint command teams, to make sure that everybody knows what each other's doing, and that the intelligence is sharing at the fast pace in real time.
I would encourage you guys to make sure that happens in all the provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Mott.
Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I can't help but laugh at Mr. Lloyd's last comments in his round when he said, quote, "I hope you get all the resources you need to do this work." And when he actually had the opportunity to vote on some of these resources, he actually voted against it. And following up on some questions about organized crime, it actually brings me back. I come from a region where the Hells Angels has been, active at different points of time. They don't really go away, but there are spikes in terms of activity. In fact, when I was in high school, I did a placement with our local police in forensics, and organized crime was a big focus of some of that work. So did organized crime groups just spike after the Supreme Court shut down mandatory minimums?
I would say the activities of the organized crime groups, when you see this, I wouldn't say spike, they're constant. They're forever engaged in criminal activity, even though if you break one cell down, there's another cell that replaces it, and it continues.
And as part of their operations, it's really what the market demands. It's almost an organized crime capitalism, that if there is a large profit opportunity in, let's say today it's fentanyl, and in 5 years from now it's some different drug, that they change operations, that it's not that the organizations themselves don't continue to operate, but perhaps maybe the drug of choice or the guns of choice or the trafficking of choice might change depending on where there's an actual market?
As I said earlier on, organized crime are driven by financial gains. And what you see profit-wise, or if they change from one commodity to another, geography also plays a key role, where this is why you see sometimes turf wars with different organized crime group, because they're expanding territory, whatnot. But whatever is the commodity of the day and the demand of the day, the organized crime is involved.
Thank you. And Commissioner, earlier on, in response to a question, you started to answer about dealing with some of the societal challenges, because if there wasn't a market, for example, for some of these drugs, then that profit margin wouldn't exist. Can you speak to some of the programs? And I would assume there are task force within your agency that are working on this with local partners on how best to actually deal with some of the roots of the markets of some of these illicit drugs in particular?
It would vary across the country, but the commanding officers, the RCMP commanding officers in each divisions, and the commanding officers for the federal regions work closely with the province to see what's required to make sure that there's the right support. Obviously, there's always a question of funding in that, but there's right support, and basically, how can you get the information out to the people who are actually using it?
Thank you. And President O'Gorman, can you speak to? We've had questions at this committee before. You provided, I think, in your last appearance, some of the numbers in terms of staffing levels. I know this continues to be a question that I would love to ensure that we have the most accurate and up-to-date numbers. It's my understanding that CBSA recruits something like 500 new agents every year. Is that accurate? And is it also accurate that the previous cuts of over 1,100 CBSA official agents or staff have been fully restored and additional officers or agents hired? Can you confirm some of those numbers for me, please?
So we can put through about 500 officers through our college every year. We're regaining after the pandemic where we had to close, so it's about 500 a year. Right now, we've got 16,700 employees, 8,500 of whom are frontline officers.
But can you answer my question about the previous 1,100 CBSA agent cuts? Have they been restored? And in addition to more officers added? Because this seems to be a question of contention, and I would like to have some answers on that.
So our overall complement has increased.
Okay.
I'm afraid I can't answer the 1,100 specifically.
But overall, the complement has increased.
Yes, this is the most number of people we have had working at CBSA.
Ever?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Michaud, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. Ms. O'Gorman, first question pertains to the demands of border agents saying that able to help out at the border during repatriation of certain individuals to ensure that things are done properly. Could this type of thing be present in the minister's plan that he's just tabled, in your opinion, or to your knowledge? I'm going to thank you for your question. I find it interesting that the union is saying that except for an order in council that goes back to 81, if it didn't existed, we can repatriate tomorrow. But at the same time, we're missing thousands of officers. So you can't have both scenarios. So every day at the ports of entry, we carry out our mission, our mandate.
Who is carrying out its mandate. If the government provided CBSA with the resources and the mandate to do that, we would. But that's not my area of focus right now. My focus is the ports of entry, our people internationally, the marine ports, inland. We have 200 investigators. So that is my focus. Alors, juste pour être clair, je pense que c'est
So just to be clear, it's easy to say that's the only thing that prevents us from taking action. But now we are carrying out our mandate at the ports of entry throughout the country and throughout the world. So I thank you for your question and an opportunity to clarify a comment that was a little bit simplistic as far as I'm concerned. And as respect to the last time you said that you were adjusting to meet with the U.S. policy, and your organization provided a breakdown of this, and Trump referred to these examples. We see that more than 2 cars per hour. So the impact is greater than we thought it was. Is it possible at this point to begin dialogue once again with the U.S.? And I see that before 8 o'clock this morning, there's fewer people that go through than after later on in the evening. Is everything written in stone, or can you still talk to them and perhaps adjust the way we do things? That was an average. So as an average, I don't want to minimize for those individuals who used the ports of entry during this period of time. There was an impact for these individuals. But in this case, there's a port of entry that's not very far, so I know that adjustments need to be made. And I know that there's a lot of negotiations underway.
I think in a previous exchange with Mr. Lloyd, you reported roughly the number of 4,000 organized criminal or organized crime groups in Canada. And I'm going to assume that of those 4,000, I mean, that's on a spectrum. They don't all have the same capacity, members, et cetera. So amongst that 4,000, I think certainly there are some that operate in many different countries, and they have very organized and sophisticated distribution networks, and so on. I guess what I'm wondering, Commissioner, is, in terms of like the resources that the RCMP has, just specifically for organized crime. In your opinion, like what is the most effective way to combat organized crime? I mean, is it economic starvation, continuously interrupting their source of income? Because I'm just worried that a lot of the people who are getting arrested may be quite far down the organizational ladder. I'm just wondering, what do you need more from us in terms of going after the people who are the leaders of these organizations?
You think they're going to be dumb enough to put themselves in the limelight of the RCMP?
Thank you for the question, Erman.
They lead an organization
for something. In Matt mentioned earlier, the 4,000 number comes from CISC, who's a Criminal Intelligence Service Canada, and the definition of organized crime in the criminal code is a group of at least 3 individuals engaged in ongoing criminal activity for the purpose of making money. So I don't want to alarm everybody that way where so the definition is very. So to your point, Mr. McGregor, there's different. I think strong collaborative partnerships and intelligence sharing is one. Making sure it's not only law enforcement, but I think we have to look at bringing a different perspective of who is better positioned to ensure that there's maximum impact to organized crime. Maybe it's Revenue Canada if you get into the books. Often the money laundering file does not start with the money laundering itself. It starts with the commodity, and then it leads you into money laundering. But definitely, if you cut off the source of income, that's where it's going to hurt the most.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very
But
much.
good luck getting to that. That's why they're an organized crime group for a reason.
11 minutes left. So we're supposed to have 2 more 5-minute rounds. So if that works for everyone, we'll wrap up after that. Okay.
They run their organization better than the RCMP runs its.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one question. I want to go back quickly to the people on the terror watch list who, the U.S. has intercepted down there. What have we done here in this country to tighten our border security so these terrorists aren't admitted in the first place?
So the scenario you cited were people going to the U.S. and being
I'm talking about
back.
the ones that they're in Canada already.
Right.
And so what are we doing to make sure that those on terror watch lists aren't allowed to continue to enter Canada?
Okay, but the statistics of people that the U.S. encounters and turns back, they may be Canadian as well. So I wouldn't take that whole number and say they are all foreign nationals into the country. So
I would agree. I would agree with that assessment.
And so to your point, your question, which is for those who have come from abroad who are foreign nationals in Canada being turned away. So certainly our colleagues from Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship would be well placed, but they have tightened up their visa requirements. Mr. McCrory can talk maybe a bit about the security screening process, if you'll.
Okay, yeah.
So yes, so I like to think of it as layers of defense that start prior to the border, and that's where, for example, IRCC requires a visa, and a portion of those are referred to us for security clearing. Okay. I think we did 34,000 applications last year, and had a non-favorable recommendation about 800 of them. Our national targeting.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute because we've heard some of these numbers before, and I know we all need to do. We all can agree we need to do a better job. But I just want to put a motion on notice before I pass the rest of my time to Mr. Lloyd. Chair, I'd like to put this motion on notice. Whereas break-and enters against small businesses in Toronto have risen 19% in the last year, and the Ottawa Police Service is warning of an alarming rise in residential break-and enters, the committee undertake a study on the issue of break-and enters and home invasions in Canada of not less than 3 meetings, and that the committee report these findings and recommendations to the House, and I would turn the remaining of my time over to Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mutz. Mr. Lloyd, you have just under 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also will be putting on notice of motion. Whereas new data shows that homicides in Canada have increased 27%, and the homicide rate has increased from 1.71 to 1.94 per 100,000 Canadians since 2015. The committee undertake a study on the causes of homicide in Canada of not less than 3 meetings, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. with my remaining time, we know that where are these transnational organized crime groups majority coming from? Like what countries are they tied to generally?
You have the organized crime group based on CISC's report, 2024 report. You have organized crime groups that work within the country, and you have a percentage of, and I don't have the exact number, but you have a number of groups that have international ties, if you wish. When I look at, when we were talking about fentanyl earlier, we know that the Mexican cartel has a strong presence and are involved in the making and distribution.
Thank you. Maybe this is a question best for the CBSA. Is can someone tell us what percentage of import containers are scanned at our ports, and what percentage of import containers are scanned at land crossings, and what percentage of containers are scanned at rail crossings?
It's a good question.
So I don't have the percentage, and we would typically not speak publicly about how we do our targeting and the numbers we scan. So it depends on our risk. It depends on the information that we've received. So generally,
we did have a representative from the union that said that there's a 0% chance that anything will be scanned at a rail crossing. Is that true?
Yeah, again, disappointing that they felt the need to put that information out there without any more context. So I'm going to ask Mr. McCrory to address that quite directly. Thank you for the question.
So all goods coming into Canada need to be reported to the CBSA, and as the President alluded to, we do a risk assessment on all those goods. We also have targeting in certain modes that allow us to target. What I would say is that in any mode, when we have suspicion, either based on the targeting, our intel, or our risk assessment, or based on the experience of well-trained border services officers, we will pull that.
Now, we know that the
conveyance
U.S.
aside and
discloses
search.
their percentages. Is there a reason why they can disclose their percentages, but Canada does not?
As I've suggested, we get data on all material coming into the country. We use that data to perform the risk assessments, and we prefer not to talk about how many actually will undergo an examination, because we don't want to give away our methodologies.
Would it be a number that Canadians would consider high, or a number that Canadians would consider low?
I think Canadians should take solace in the fact that we do a risk assessment on everything coming into the country.
Thank you very much. And with the remaining 5 minutes, we'll go to Mr. McDonald, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses again. Quickly, I just want to touch on Bill C-70, Canada's new Countering Foreign Interference Act, came into effect last June. How will the measures in that bill enhance the ability for CBSA to leverage intelligence at the border?
So I wouldn't say that CBSA is a central player in foreign interference, but I will say that we are an active member of the national security community, and we do have tools at our disposal, not least the ability to remove people. And as I understand foreign interference, that a criminal justice outcome is sometimes quite challenging to obtain. And so sometimes the best outcome is removing somebody who is engaged in that activity out of Canada. So we have relevant tools.
Thank you. And I know back in 2017, we introduced legislation allowing CBSA officers to inspect imported and exported mail weighing 30 grams. And I want to put this into context. And I'm asking, what is, or let me see, how many doses can be defined in approximately 30 grams of fentanyl?
So a small number of pills can be mixed with other things and made into several doses. So I don't think I could give you an exact equation. But the fact is people were sending pills through the mail.
Okay, thank you. And I just quickly, I know obviously your organizations have to be very agile. You mentioned at the beginning of this session that you're heading to Washington, D.C. In the near future. Can you talk a little bit about the positive things that are happening between the relationships between the U.S. and their organizations and your organizations, and what could be improved? And maybe each of you could take a quick run at that.
Sure, I'll start. The good things that are happening, we have people embedded in the U.S. Targeting Center, and they will be sending somebody to us starting in January, and we're quite pleased about that. We're coordinating our infrastructure investments, and I've already mentioned that. We're going to undertake a pre-clearance pilot that would have Canada Border Service officers co-locate on the U.S. side and pre-clear people before they come to Canada. And I'll say that's a pilot with the express purpose of seeing if it works. And that's, I think, quite important. And then working internationally. The first people when we send liaison officers out, in addition to meeting people in their host country, is to meet their U.S. Customs and Border Protection and DEA counterparts. So really, as I said, information is being shared all the time and to very good effect.
Thank you. Commissioner?
If I may add, from an RCMP perspective, at national headquarters, we have someone from the United States Border Patrol embedded at our national headquarters with our border team, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard. The relationship we have with them is strong. We're just building and even making them stronger. There's good sharing information. We're trying to align technology as well with USBP so we don't duplicate things and we can benefit from both sides of the border of the technology that's being used. So there's a lot of good work going on. And again, for myself and Aaron going down into Washington is really to meet the newly appointed people who are going to be responsible for it and build that relationship at the most senior level.
Thank you. Also, just curious, we heard that approximately 0.2% of fentanyl goes into the U.S. from Canada. Where's the 99.8% come from that goes into the U.S.?
Well, that so I have a report here from the USBP Homeland Security that dates back July of 2023, and it does cite in the report that Canadian-produced fentanyl cannot currently compete with Mexican-sourced fentanyl in the Pacific Northwest and is not currently known to enter the U.S. market at the retail level. And I've mentioned before that it's costing them 1/40th of the price that it's being done in Canada. So we strongly believe, based on the intelligence we have, and it's confirmed here by our USBP, that the Mexican cartel's flow of fentanyl is coming up towards the West Coast, and we believe that it's been predominantly used in the United States because of the cost versus the cost that we're producing it at.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Duhem, I have to mention that some of your former friends speak of you highly in your hockey ability and Tignish PEI when you were here. So not about your profession, just about the hockey. So
yeah, let's talk about hockey. That's relevant.
I certainly appreciate your time. It's extremely important issues that you're dealing with. And we know that the innovation and technology that the criminals are advancing on a daily, you have to be very agile in what you're doing, and we appreciate all the work that you've done so far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. And with that, we've ended our formal line of questioning. I just want to thank you very sincerely to all of you for being with us today. We know that you all work very, very hard on these important issues, and I'm certain the committee will be inviting you back in the coming months and years as we deal with the new challenges that are forthcoming. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Okay.
There's agreement. I'll adjourn the meeting. Yes, adjourned.
Yes, there they go. They adjourned the meeting. Let's just tune in to the House for 5 minutes, and then we're going to call it. Obviously, they're talking about STTC.
Contempt of the need to be able to get a security clearance. We even have Patrick Brown now that has said foreign interference.
Does this guy ever go home? Does he ever do anything? Does he just sleep in the bottom of the House of Commons? I swear, he never combs his hair. He's always he's here first thing in the morning. He's here till the House adjourns. I don't know what this guy does besides live in the House.
The leader of the Conservative Party was once a minister.
Yeah, guys, I just wanted to give a quick 5 minutes here. We'll just watch this, and you guys, as I mentioned in the chat, we are.
Mr. Speaker, the leader has been
did you check out that video I told you about earlier? No, I didn't. Sorry, can you remind me again, Chris? It was that comedy skit, right? Can you remind me again? I can check your chats actually.
He'll decide what he's able to talk about.
Have I ever thought about doing a round table that I did with other people like Pleb did before? Yes, actually I do want to do that. I've been meaning to figure out a couple things technical wise, but I would love to do a call in with you guys soon. So you guys can all call in, and you should be able to like use your phone, and we'll do a quick 5-minute or 3-minute chat with everybody, and we'll see how many people we can get in 1 hour. But I would love to do that. That way we can all formally meet each other through video, I guess. But yeah, I did like his idea on that with doing like a call-in session, and people, all the viewers could call in, and we could just have a quick chat about stuff. But yeah, I did want to also say that, as I mentioned before in chat, that on Monday and Tuesday, those are our pretty much last days of the sitting for this year. So we're not going to be doing much else until January 27th, which is when the House resits. So we do have quite a bit of a break. I think I mentioned this during question period that I'm still going to get clips out on the channel. There's still going to be conferences and, stuff with reporters, but it is going to get pretty slow for about a month until we sit back in the House. So, it kind of makes me a bit sad because, I like doing the live streams with you guys. Chat's always really good. You guys are awesome in chat. You've been super generous this week, which I do want to thank everybody. It's, Gordon, there's been people joining the coffee club or Axe the Tax Club today. There's been Shed, Hermit, there's been Sheba, Wendy did their super chat. There's just been so many people this week just joining into the club and all that kind of stuff. So that's just been awesome. Appreciate you guys for all of that. And we're going to definitely get back to the House as soon as we can, but we'll do Monday, Tuesday for sure. We don't go live tomorrow, but it'll be exciting for Monday, Tuesday with the financial statement coming out. So that's it. I just wanted to take that quick little 5 minutes to let you guys know that I appreciate you guys and appreciate the chats, and we'll wrap it up here in a few minutes. We're just going to see what the House is doing before we call it.
Any point in time, the NDP could change its tune and allow the government off the hook. If she wants to hold the Liberal Prime Minister to contempt, I suggest that she try a unanimous consent motion and see what happens.
Yeah, good idea.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for the speech, and I would just follow up on the last question. I'd like to ask him if the NDP was putting forward a motion to actually find this Prime Minister in contempt, which I do find this Prime Minister in contempt of Parliament several times in this Parliament since I've been here 5 years, not 19 like my colleague. Can I ask him which NDP party he think will show up, the one that actually is an opposition party or the one that is actually in the back pocket of this Prime Minister?
Yeah, exactly.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
I want to, apologies to the interpreters there, I'll leave that desktop alone. I want to thank my colleague for his question. Look, the reality is, Mr. Speaker, he asked a very important question. Whenever it comes to standing up and lecturing or trying to appear virtuous, the NDP always, at least in appearances, tries to appear that they're doing what they say they're doing. But every time the rubber hits the road, when it comes to the point of decision, when it really matters, which is when we vote, the NDP always votes opposite of everything that they say. And we witnessed it this week. We actually put the words in a motion of the NDP leader himself. And the NDP leader and his caucus voted against the very words he said, the very position he took. No one can ever believe anything the leader of the NDP ever says ever again.
And comments, and I know because the honourable member stood up long enough there. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, because the member was knowingly misleading the House. No contempt, he said. There was no contempt.
I know we're getting all right. That's so far almost over the edge. So I'm just going to ask the member maybe to rethink that line and go at it again. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Was contempt. The member knows there was contempt. The contempt that was shown by the Harper government is very clear to Canadians. The contempt of the Harper government was adjudicated here in the House. So the member knows full well that there was contempt. He knows full well of the long litany of Harper scandals, how deplorable they were to veterans and seniors, how bad that government was, how abysmally bad, and the scandals of billions of dollars far beyond the STDC. The NDP has gotten to the bottom of every one of the Liberal scandals. We weren't able to get to the bottom of Conservative scandals because each and every time, showing complete contempt for democratic processes and getting any sort of transparency at all, the Harper government shut it down. But to clarify, Mr. Speaker, because this member knows full well, and he needs to come clean with Canadians, The Harper government was found in contempt by this Parliament, and he has to admit it. Will he admit the contempt charge that was adjudicated and resolved here on the floor of the House of Commons?
Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
You know, it never ceases to amaze me that the member for New Westminster Burnaby conflates issues the way that he actually does. Now, the Harper government probably spent money in a way that the NDP didn't agree with, but it actually led to one of the most prosperous times in Canadian history. As a matter of fact, at the end of the Harper era in government, the Canadian household income was every bit as wealthy and on par with that of the United States of America. Now we actually...
Order. I did give the honourable member plenty of time to ask his question, so I'm hoping that he will allow. I hope that he will allow the honourable member. I would hope the honourable member would allow him to answer it. The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
You would notice, Mr. Speaker, that I did not interrupt the member when he was asking his question, which was full of so many falsehoods, I couldn't even begin to name all of them, but I'm not afforded the same courtesy back when I'm answering the question. I'll continue on, Mr. Speaker. The difference now between the median household income of a Canadian versus that of an American has never been wider than it is now, and that only took 9 years of a Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, where I've never seen a collection of bad ideas, bad judgment, and bad leadership. And it just amazes me that the New Democrats would support somebody with that many strikes against him.
Questions and comments to the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, let's be very clear. Stephen Harper, his Parliamentary Secretary, was the current leader of the Conservative Party, was the only government in the Commonwealth to be held in contempt of Parliament. You can close your eyes all you want to the member, Mr. Speaker, but that is the truth, and the member knows it, whether he wants to admit it or not. The question I have for him is in regards to the security clearance. The leader of the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green all have the security clearance, and they're not trapped. They're still able to talk. What is the real reason why the leader of the Conservative Party refuses to tell Canadians about his past?
Under a minute, the honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already answered this question.
Security clearance.
And in fact, actually, the assertions that the Parliamentary Secretary just made are simply not true, because the leader of the Bloc Québécois, when speaking to the media outside of this place, said, "I cannot be as frank with you as I was before." Now I'm paraphrasing in English, of course, Mr. Speaker, because he's taken the security clearance and he's had the security briefing, and he was then muzzled to a certain degree in what he was able to say. Look, this is just a red herring put into play by the Parliamentary Secretary. The Prime Minister can give and authorize a briefing to the Washington Post. If the Prime Minister wants the Leader of the Opposition to know something, he simply has to pick up the phone, call him, and tell him what he wants him to know.
Reprise.
All right, but yeah, we're going to call it there, guys. That was it for committee. That was it for today. 3 live streams today. It was pretty big. You guys know we don't go live tomorrow. What other tab is that I have open? Sorry, I had multiple tabs open because we were covering multiple things. But yeah, so I will see you guys Monday, Tuesday, and then that'll be it for the year, which, as I said already in chat, I'm kind of sad about, because, you know, I love talking to you guys and I love the live streams and everything, so it's going to be a bit boring for 5 weeks, but maybe you could sneak a live in review kind of end of year thing. I might be able to do something like that. I know even Savage was saying maybe we can do a live stream for a second or something, but yeah. That's it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and work on some clips for the channel and work on stuff for Monday, Tuesday, and then we are going to be done for the year. So I hope everyone has a great, fantastic rest of your rest of your evening. Excuse me. And have a great weekend. If you guys got to get any Christmas shopping done, I hope it goes well for you. Unfortunately, I don't think that tax cut has come in yet. That might save you a whole 20 cents, but... I also do want to give a shout out, as I mentioned before, to the people that joined the club. Wendy with the super chat, Gordon with the gifted membership, Savage with the just recent super chat. So really appreciate you guys supporting the channel. And we will see you Monday.